welcome to the all-new, all-different #1 Comics Podcast, a weekly comic book review podcast where myself, Dan, and my co-host, Bob, say hi, Bob.
Hi, Bob.
We break down, review, check out, talk about a brand new first issue comic book that came out this very week in comic book shops. And we tell you guys if we think that you should move on to issue number 2. This week we're going to be taking a deep dive into the all-new #1 from Dark Horse Comic Books. Bob, it is
Stranger Things, Tales from Hawkins, written by Jody Houser, art by Cal Philippe, I believe is his name.
We're going to go with that and hope that we're right. If we offended you by saying your name the wrong way,
We're very sorry.
we greatly apologize. Please guest on the podcast and teach us how to say your name correctly. That's my call to action today. If any creator out there, we say your name wrong, all you got to do is come on the podcast so that way we can learn how to pronounce it the correct way. So with that being said, we will be right back after this short break. Welcome back to the all-new, all-different #1 Comics Podcast. We are going to start our deep dive here on a brand new #1 issue that came out this very week in comic book shops, as well as digitally if you're reading that way. We're going to be talking about the new #1 from Dark Horse Comics, Stranger Things, Tales from Hawkins, issue #1. I want to talk a little bit about the writer of this book, Jody Houser. Bob, I don't know if you've read very many of these Stranger Things tie-in, but Jody Houser is kind of the house writer for these things. Every single issue of Stranger Things that I picked up has been penned by Jody Houser. Looks like Jody Houser really either enjoys Stranger Things or Dark Horse really enjoys Jody writing on Stranger Things, or maybe a combination of both.
Or Netflix enjoys her.
Sure. So, taken from Jody Houser's own website, here's a small synopsis of what Jody Houser brings to the table. Jody has written for DC Comics for the titles Mother Panic, Supergirl, Harley Quinn, and Poison Ivy. For Marvel Comics, at the titles Star Wars and Web of Black Widow. Under Dark Horse Comics for Stranger Things, Critical Role, and StarCraft. For Titan Comics for Doctor Who, IDW Publishing, Orphan Black, Star Trek, X-Files, and she also wrote Faith under the Valiant Comics banner, among others, and she continues to pursue comics and other writing projects. Not much of a big description of Jody Houser other than what else do you need? Jody Houser has kind of worked everywhere on everything. It looks like Jody Houser is big at bringing adaptations into comics. Looks like that's kind of Jody Houser's strong point there with the Stranger Things, Critical Role, Doctor Who, Orphan Black, Star Trek, X-Files, of course, as well as maintaining stories for some of these known characters like Supergirl and Harley Quinn. I don't know that Jody Houser created Faith for Valiant Comics. Well, definitely not, because Faith was in Harbinger beforehand. But yeah, it looks like Jody Houser is very big on adaptations. Maybe she's really good at consuming media and then writing spin-off stories or something. Obviously, she knows what she's doing here. The artist who we're going to talk about, again, have no clue how to pronounce this artist's name, so we're going to go with Cal Philippe. Please, if we've said your name wrong, please don't be offended. Just come onto the podcast and teach us how to say it the correct way.
Again, we're very sorry.
It's an invite for you. That's all we're looking for. I didn't see much from this artist online. I know you didn't either upon your deep dive searching for them.
No, I did not.
Looks like they did Nightwing issue number 96, 97, 99, and 100, which is a really cool milestone issue. And as I remember the artwork in those Nightwing books being great, because I collect them as well. And then also a Stranger Things miniseries, or possibly just a one-shot Stranger Things summer special. The synopsis from Dark Horse's website about the book reads, on the surface, Hawkins seems like the kind of town where nothing bad could ever happen. But in the fall of '83, it's anything but safe. When two friends head out to the woods with their rifles and a six-pack, the would-be hunters find themselves the prey of a nightmarish beast who has claimed the wilderness around town and everything inside it, including them.
See, and it's 2 six-packs.
Yeah, well, that was kind of the other thing I was going to get into, but maybe they didn't want to spoil that part. Maybe that was a big spoiler for anyone picking up the book for the first time. But
Easter
egg. Exactly. But yeah, you are correct. We just kind of getting into the book. It opens with two guys who look maybe past the prime of their life, you know, a little older, but not decrepit or anything, maybe in their 50s or so, 50s, 60s, I guess. And one of them is named Dale and the other Henry. They're meeting up for a day of hunting, as the synopsis says. And they kind of go into some casual conversation about drinking, about how one of them thought it was the other one's turn to bring drinks, and the other thought the same. So they ended up with essentially a 12-pack of beer instead of a 6. So.
Because when you have guns, you should definitely bring beer.
Absolutely. It sounds like a wonderful combination. So they talk about drinking, and sadly, presumably, one of their wives having cancer, again, who I assume is one of their wives, maybe a child, maybe something else, I'm not sure, but somebody having cancer. They notice some blood on the ground after their conversation, and they assume that someone else was hunting that day, although they point out that they had not heard any gunshots. Next up, they find a mauled, what I'm going to conclude as a turkey.
I'm guessing a buzzard.
Oh, okay, a buzzard. Okay, sure.
Just based on the wings.
Okay, well, then a mauled buzzard on the ground, and they state that they don't think that it looks like any type of person could have done that. As they set out to find whatever did it, Henry volunteers to kind of be the bait to lure whoever or whatever in, and then Dale seemingly is captured.
Yes, because he decides to go off on his own and try to find a high spot to see this creature, whatever, maul this buzzard or turkey.
Sure, whatever it might be. Henry then antagonizes, again, whatever took Dale, and then we see what we know as the Demogorgon appear. Henry is then taken to the Upside Down and sees Dale, and Henry explores the Upside Down for a little bit. And let me not downplay it here. There's not a lot of dialogue in this issue. A good portion of this part of it is kind of Henry exploring the Upside Down. He's going through, seeing the empty, kind of elseworldly feel of the Upside Down here, the dark, tattered, weird world of the Upside Down.
This is basically the visual part of the book, where it doesn't really need dialogue.
Sure.
You know? The Upside Down, you have to see it visually, you know. So, yeah, again, there isn't a whole lot of dialogue right here. There's more dialogue in the first part of the book. You know, now it's just, okay, let's just explore.
Yes. And then Henry is attacked by the Demogorgon. As Henry lays on the ground, seeming like he's dying, Will, from the television show Stranger Things, comes and checks on him. Will doesn't appear to, I don't know, shaken up by it or anything. He appears pretty calm there. And it appears that Henry is maybe making a dying wish to Will to find his friend Dale and bring him home. And Will says that he will get him home.
My best guess is that this takes place shortly after maybe the first episode or two of season 1 of Stranger Things, when Will is first kidnapped and taken to the Upside Down. And that, you know, it ties into the earliest, you know, foundings of, you know, Stranger Things and the lore of Stranger Things.
Yeah, it's a little, I think as I was reading it, it does, of course, tie into the Stranger Things world and Hawkins, as it should. There's really only a couple of beats here where they they kind of tie it in up until the point where you get Will. They do talk about seeing 11, but they think that it's a boy with a shaved head.
Yes.
And they talk about 11 robbing somewhere, a store or something.
Benny's, I'm guessing it was, the early episodes where she goes into a supermarket and just grabs Eggo waffles.
It makes sense. And then of course it points out that they don't know that Benny is dead, or
Yes.
if that's the character's name, has died. Not really what I was expecting, and of course we'll get into our narrative and all of that whenever we get into the review here. But I was really kind of looking at this as a horror anthology kind of set in Hawkins, and it looks like it's going to tie into the main show a lot more than that. It's not just going to be like a spin-off type of thing with tales that happen in this world, which I'm not necessarily saying I have an opinion on whether I like it or not. It's just not what I expected. I didn't expect to see Will here. When they first mentioned 11 in the issue, of course not by name, but as the character, I was okay with something like that. I felt like I assumed something like that would happen. When we got Will here at the end, I was a little more confused, a little bit kind of caught off guard, and of course we're going to tie this back into the main show. Now, again, not to say that there's anything wrong with that. I think that maybe Jody might be trying to convert people who watch the show over to comics, and that's great and everything. And I think that is a good entry point for them if they see some of the characters referenced that they recognize and all of that. But just as a comic book reader and someone who has seen the show, I definitely didn't need that.
Well, no, and I went into this issue thinking that it was going to be more of, maybe the people you didn't see during the TV show.
Yes.
Because, as we've talked about before, like with Marvel TV shows,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just for the casual fan who maybe has never seen Stranger Things.
Yes.
There's probably not a whole lot of people out there, but I know there's people out there who have not seen Stranger Things.
There's some that exist, right?
They pick up this issue, and you have to have a little bit of knowledge of Stranger Things. It's not like you can go into this issue and know everything that's going on. I mean, when you get that reference to 11, if you've never seen the show, you will have no idea what's going on. And when you see Will at the end, it'll be like, who is this person supposed to be, and why should I care about him?
Yep, absolutely. I can agree with that. And I think, again, this would be something that I'm assuming that Jody is using to bring in readers, bring in potential Stranger Things fans into the world of comic books. This is just another media that they can consume. Of course, we know whenever Stranger Things came out, it was a very, very big cultural phenomenon. A lot of people really became obsessed with this world, especially a lot of kids. A lot of kids were able to identify with those younger characters. And then it was a lot of nostalgia for us that grew up in the 80s and 90s, who remember things like, look, of course, everyone says this a million times, so let me sound like a broken record and a cliche, but of course, the times when we didn't have to tell our parents where we were, and we could just ride off in little gangs on bicycles and ride through the woods and kind of do whatever, and then come home later whenever dinner was ready or whatever, or as all the cool kids say, when the street lights came on. And
that day and age, unfortunately, has passed us by.
Sure, which again, no opinion on it, neither good nor bad. It's just a different time. But I think that Stranger Things really hit that right level of nostalgia and really good writing, and then of course great visuals too. We had a lot of connections to stuff like the universes that Stephen King had created, and things like the Goonies and stuff like that, with these gangs of kids kind of exploring and everything. And Stranger Things just hit that right time for that right age group where this was familiar enough to us. And then, of course, a lot of parents probably showing their children the show, who have younger kids that are probably around the age of these characters. And it just hit. It was a huge cultural phenomenon. And I think that there still is a lot of those fans out there who want more of that media, who want more of those tie-ins, who want to explore more of this world than what they can get from just the seasons of the show. So I think it's great that Dark Horse is putting out these books and they have Jody Houser here writing them and everything. With that being said, I do kind of want to just go ahead and get into what we kind of thought about the book. I want to go into the story. I want to talk about Jody's writing here and the beats and kind of what we've done the last few episodes. We talked about the beats of the story here. Now, this is a very, very, I'm going to contradict myself because it's a very, very low stakes, high stake story. There is a lot at stake here, but it's not something like Marvel's The Wasp where we're introducing all these characters and hitting all throughout the town. It's not like Black Cloak where we have to build an entire world. I think we're familiar enough with Hawkins from watching the television show, but at the same time, even if we weren't, this does enough in the little tiny bit of setup at the beginning that it does where it doesn't really matter. You can kind of go in this completely blind and read it and still enjoy it, I think. But as far as the beats in this small stake story here, how did you think it went? What did you think of the story beats?
I mean, I thought it was good. I thought the story beats were good. I mean, how it opens up with the Dale and Henry just going out for a morning hunt with their 2 6-packs of beers, which is safe. And yeah, I mean, it just didn't seem to go too fast, but it got into the, I guess you would say, action, fast enough with going into the upside down and all that kind of, just going into the familiar, Stranger Things environments.
Yeah, and I feel like this artist, of course, this isn't the art section of the review. We'll get into that in a minute, but really was able to capture that upside down feel. I remember that being, of course, everyone does, one of the most striking portions of the show when you watch the show and they go into the upside down and you notice this disconnected kind of, I don't know, I'm not sure exactly what to call it, but this disconnected kind of overgrown kind of dead world that's just weird and quiet and it's just a very interesting place. I think that of course is one of the most striking, important things about Stranger Things, aside from the characters, is the upside down, kind of that backwards world that they have going on. And I think that the artist here really was able to capture that in a nice way. I want to get into the narrative, and again, this is probably the last time that I'll say this, but I've said this the last few episodes. We're kind of marrying the narrative and the dialogue at this point. I think that we might bring them back as separate review segments for other shows that maybe get into more of a separate feel for the dialogue and narrative. But in something like this, they kind of go hand in hand, so there's not really any point to break them down separately. But as far as dialogue and narrative here, what were your thoughts? I definitely have thoughts, but I would like to hear what you think about the narrative of the story and then the dialogue given to our characters.
Well, I thought, all that, made sense. I mean, you could tell that Dale and Henry, were lifelong friends, just how they were talking to each other. And
sure.
That they cared about one another, bringing up either the wife or daughter having cancer and, the other guy, being compassionate about that. And then just, looking at whatever kind of creature mauled this bird and being like, oh my God, what is this? The scream from Dale when he gets kidnapped and, the dying wish at the end or the dying words, I mean, you can definitely tell that, he's, dying. There's no gray area in that. So I think the dialogue, fit perfectly for what was portrayed on the pages.
Yeah, I think the dialogue was fine too. I think I had more of a problem with the narrative. And it's not a huge problem, but it was a little bit of a problem. I feel like, for one, yes, I'm used to this world enough to where I can understand what's going on. But I feel like as far as the narrative in this, it moved along a little fast paced. I didn't really get any time to sit with anyone. Of course, these are most likely just going to be one-off characters that are just going to exist in probably this 4-issue mini, and then we'll never see them again, which is fine. But still, I need to get invested enough to care here. I don't. What I'm hoping this doesn't do is just kind of shift it off to Will and then his friends, and then we hear nothing else about the Hunters again. And it's not a Tales of Hawkins; it's a tale of Stranger Things.
Well, and say what you were talking about just now about, the narrative and it moving too fast, and it could have slowed down a little and built it up a little bit more. That's the bittersweetness, I guess you would say, of these tie-in comics to already existing properties.
Yep.
Because again, they, I hate to use the word, but they pander towards the people who already know enough about this world that they don't have, that they go, okay, we don't have to explain this because we've already explained this in, this vehicle. So, and again, that goes back to my whole point about, that is one thing about, these TV comics or these already established franchise comics. I mean, unless you know about this world, when you read it on page, you're not going to know what's going on.
Sure, and I absolutely agree with everything that you're saying. I think one of the things that I wanted to talk about a little bit with the dialogue here was you had talked a little bit before about that small cancer subplot that we got there.
Yes.
I think that it's important to identify that while that's brought up and talked about in maybe 2 panels, maybe 2 or 3 panels or whatever, that's again, that's like a pretty high stakes situation to be in. Your wife or daughter or whoever, caretaker or someone that you live with, someone that you're close to has cancer, they're going through treatment and whatever. And it's kind of talked about with the same level of talking about bringing a 6-pack out to hunting. It's not really elaborated on much. Now, if you want to introduce something like that, I feel like you introduce something like that for a reason. There's never a time that you need to bring up a cancer or illness subplot that doesn't directly affect the story. And I'm scared that here this is not going to directly affect the story. I'm scared that maybe it was kind of shoehorned in so we have like a little bit of, empathy for the characters or whatever. Maybe so they don't just look like guys who kind of go out in the woods and drink and shoot things, and they're a little bit more than that. And I like that, but I think that it is kind of just glazed over, and I'm not sure what the purpose of that is. That kind of does scare me. I can't lie about that.
And I do agree with you on that. I mean, sometimes when they bring up something especially as life-altering as cancer and chemo, they should bring it up for a reason and not just, okay, we need to, further the story about, this guy cares about things and whatnot. So hopefully they did that for a reason and it wasn't used just to further the story.
Sure. I feel like when you do something like that, you kind of could put in anything. It doesn't have to be cancer. And too many times I feel like we're reminded of cancer. And that's something that unfortunately has infected a lot of our lives. A lot of us have either lost loved ones due to cancer or had a family member or loved one had to battle with cancer, whether they defeated cancer or not or whatever, or possibly someone out there has had cancer. It's not typically something you want to be continuously reminded of when trying to escape and read a comic book. And if it impacts the story, then fine. I take something like Guardians of the Galaxy, where of course Star-Lord's mother had cancer, and it was kind of placed there for a reason and everything. That makes sense to the story. I understand why that was in there. I think that something like this, really, you could kind of have come up with anything if it's a throwaway. Now, if it's important to the story, that's a different thing. But if this is more of a throwaway, we don't ever mention it again, or we don't see any aspects of that, or it's not important to the story, then it could have been anything. How's your wife feeling after she had the flu? how's your kid doing after how she got her cast off the day after she broke her arm. You can still talk and still have us empathize with these characters and what they have going on in life. But to bring in a cancer subplot, look, maybe this was a long side tangent, but to me, I just feel like it needs to be important to bring that in.
Just something not so serious.
Yes, exactly. It kind of just brings you down for a minute when maybe you weren't looking to be brought down.
It does, and comics are ultimately an escape.
Yep. So I want to talk a little bit, now that we got our beats and narrative and dialogue out of the way, about the world building. This is definitely a world building story. Of course, anything set in Hawkins, set in the Stranger Things universe, is going to be world building, because that's kind of the whole point of Stranger Things. They're building this world, not only of this world of nostalgia in the early 80s, but this world that we all kind of live in that has this weird backdoor to it, that we're privy to throughout the series and then through the comics as well. So the world building here, of course, we're in these woods, this forest in Hawkins, and we're taken to the Upside Down. We talked a little bit about the Upside Down. We don't have to necessarily talk about the artwork yet, but as far as world building, and we really only have this one setting, how did you feel this world was fleshed out?
I thought the world was fleshed out well. I mean, you could definitely tell it was the Upside Down, because you have the contrast of, beautiful day, beautiful dawn, going hunting, and then all of a sudden he wakes up and it's just, totally dark. You see I don't want to call them, what would you call it, ash falling?
Yeah, that's always what I assume too. It's kind of ash. It almost reminded me of those scenes in Silent Hill where you get the ash falling. So yeah, it's pretty reminiscent to that. Yeah, it definitely, of course, you take a forest or woods or anywhere like that can take place anywhere. It's not really integral to the story of this, but it fits the narrative properly here for these guys to be out in the woods hunting. I do like that. And once we're taken to the Upside Down, like I talked about before, I feel like they were really able to encompass what's shown in the television show here on the page as well. Not only in art, but in story. Now, this is kind of a curveball, and this isn't normally what we do, but I did want to ask you, Bob. I get a little confused. I've watched Stranger Things, of course, season 1 and season 2. I dipped in and out of season 3 and 4 a little bit. I became much less interested. So I haven't followed it through very closely. I don't quite understand, and maybe it's just my comprehension. I don't feel like the show's bad at explaining any of it or anything, but I don't quite understand the purpose of the Upside Down. I'm not sure where it comes from, why the Demogorgon or monsters or whatever need to take people from the regular reality into that world. What kind of the purpose of all of this is. I missed that part of the narrative, so I don't know if you quite know the answer or not, but I'm all ears if you do.
Well, the way the Upside Down was first, described, or, when we first saw it, I mean, it was basically, in Hawkins' lab, I guess they were trying to find a doorway to the other side or whatnot, and they stumbled upon it. But in season 4, we find out that, and spoiler alert for anybody who has not seen the episode or has not seen season 4 yet, but we find out that it was actually number 1 who basically created the Upside Down after he was banished to it by 11.
Okay,
in a flashback scene.
So just kind of a world for him to exist in, or
it was
create mischief in. Or?
It was an existing world,
okay.
And I believe they're gonna delve more into the origins of the Upside Down in this upcoming and final season. But it turns out that he's the one behind the Demogorgon or the Demogorgons, and he's the one behind. I'm drawing a blank. The Mind Flayer monster from season 1. So hopefully in this season, like I said, if I remember correctly, they're supposed to be explaining more of the Upside Down. So hopefully we'll get more of how it started and how it began.
Good, yeah, I would like that. I would like a little bit of exposition. Again, this isn't about the show, but as we're talking about the entire thing,
It's
in its
inevitable.
entirety,
We're reviewing a tie-in comic, so it's
Sure.
inevitable that we're going to bring it up.
Sure, I think that's kind of what turned me off from the show in the first place was you introduce too many threads and don't tie enough of them up, and then you just continue to introduce threads. I get disinterested. I need some of that tied up before you can introduce more plot points. And I just didn't feel satisfied enough with what had happened, so it kind of turned me off from the story. And that's whatever. That's just my feelings on it. I want to get into the art, of course, but again, hopefully this is the artist's correct name, Philippe. Sorry. I was actually very, very impressed with this art here. I'm very familiar with Jody Houser, as we talked about, a lot of the projects she's done, and then her other Stranger Things tie-ins. But I'm not familiar with this artist outside of those couple of Nightwing issues. This is some superb art. It looks very nice. It's done very well. Of course, as we usually talk about, there's a whole art team here. There is colorist and all of those things. Unfortunately, we don't have time to get into all of that, so we lump it in together under art, and we lump the art under the main credited artist. So all apologies to anybody else who may have worked hard on this book. But I want to talk about the characters. How did you feel about the designs of these characters? And then I think that the other tie into that question is, how do you feel them in contrast to the world of Hawkins that you know from the television show? Of course, we have representation of Will here, and then the Demogorgon, I believe that's the name of that monster, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So we have these characters that come from the television show, and then they're translated here on the page, and then we have these newer characters. So how did you feel about those characters and designs?
Well, the biggest thing for me was, can you tell that these two guys are hunters? And you can definitely tell the hunters.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you can make out their vests, you can make out their guns, you can make out their beer.
Sure.
Will, you can make him out by his signature, bowl haircut.
The bowl haircut, yes. That I assume Bob had in the 80s as well. So.
No, I had a flat top.
Oh, okay. Well, fair enough.
Like I said, the upside down, you can make that out clearly. I mean, you can see the contrast between, the daylight during the wood scene or during the opening panels, and then the contrast with the dark world of the upside down. So I mean, I think the art nailed it. I think the rough style was perfect for this comic. I mean, the spit or the bile, that the Demogorgon spits. I mean, when he opens his mouth, you can see the individual teeth and the claws. So I think art-wise, I mean, it was perfect.
Yeah, I agree. I think this is going to be a little bit of a harder one to break down like we normally do. We talk about characters, location, background, and colors. I think that we're going to just kind of agree to say the same thing about all of it. The locations, while we're really only in two locations. We're in the woods and we're in the upside down. That's really all that exists here. But they're done wonderfully. They look like they came straight from the television show.
They did.
Those woods look perfect, and they look like they fit into this world. I would love to see what this artist does with a straight horror comic. Something very bloods and gutsy, something that has like a little bit of visceral, maybe something similar to like what we reviewed last week with Where Monsters Lie. I think this is a very good artist, and I'm getting some, especially in the darker scenes here, some of that Francisco Francavilla vibe to it. Although maybe not quite as seasoned, but definitely very, very good. It's some outstanding looking art. I love the sparsity of the woods and everything whenever we're in the upside down, and it looks nice. These locations look great. These backgrounds look wonderful. They look like individual pieces of art in each panel. And then the colors as well. Whoever the colorist was on this book did a wonderful job kind of tying that all in. Again, we're in kind of shady locations here. We're in woods where there's not a lot of sun, and then we're in the upside down. So it's not a bright book by any means, but it gives off a nice vibe. It gives off a good Stranger Things vibe, and it ties into that world very well. So my thoughts, again, kind of, I agree with you. I think the art is pretty phenomenal here, and I would go ahead and just say, if anything wins in this book, it's the art. I think that this art is superb, and not to take anything away from Jody Houser's writing, but I feel that until I'm finished this series and know what's happening with the beats and know what's happening with Will coming into this world, and if we're going into Stranger Things proper and understanding things like the cancer subplot and all of that, I'm not completely sold on the writing yet, but I am sold on the artwork, absolutely.
And to expound on that, I feel, at least for me, being a Stranger Things fan, and I have to preface that by saying Stranger Things fan, because, again, you do have to understand Stranger Things to understand this book, but I think I could have easily read it without dialogue. Like, you know, like you said, what kind of comic did you call it?
Silent issue.
Silent issue.
Yes.
I feel like that could have been this.
Yeah, definitely. The art is the hero in this book. Definitely very, very nicely done. I think our last question that's going to kind of wrap up what we think about this book. Bob, you moving on to issue number 2. You have any interest in that?
I probably will, as a Stranger Things fan, and again, I really enjoy the art.
Yeah. I think that this is going to be a hard one for me. I think up until this point, I've at the very least said that I will move on to the second issue of everything that we've talked about so far, if not only just to see what happens in some of them, like something like the Wasp, definitely Black Cloak I wanted to move on to. Some of the other books we talked about, Darkwing Duck and so on, maybe I felt a little different. This one I'm a little torn on. I do want to continue to see this art. I think this artist is great. I'm interested enough in Stranger Things, but again, it's almost like throwing another thread at me that hopefully they tie everything up on, and hopefully everything was done for a purpose with reason. I'm not too sold on this book. I think that personally I will move to issue 2 just to see what happens, since I read issue 1. For anybody who's kind of on the fence in the Stranger Things universe, or if you don't care that much, I honestly wouldn't suggest this book.
No.
Maybe if you're a big fan, and maybe if you've read issue number 1, move on to issue number 2. But if not, check out the art, and I think maybe stop there.
Yeah, and you hit the nail on the head. Unless you're a Stranger Things fan, don't get this book.
Yeah, you might want to skip the $4 investment on this one if you're not a huge Stranger Things fan.
Just go online and Google it.
Yep. I think that maybe, look, and there's a lot of Stranger Things miniseries, especially a lot that Jody Houser has written. Maybe some of those are a little bit better. Maybe, again, it's just being kind of a tie-in. It's supposed to be a sidestep in that world. Maybe just doesn't do it for us, but it might do it for you. But that is our opinion on Stranger Things Tales from Hawkins. Number 1, I wanted to make sure I wasn't supposed to put county or something in there. I couldn't recall specifically. So we're going to take a quick break, and when we return, we'll have a guest on for an interview.
And here's our interview with Tony Franklin Jr. on his new Kickstarter book, The Krim Sisters, issue number 1.
Things in collecting I tend to do is I go after the books that are not quite good for the history of comics. You know,
Sure.
like when you find out, like, you're like, oh, do you remember the time where Lois Lane went black? And you're like, yeah,
I do.
I do. Or Girlfriend in a Refrigerator, or even when the Punisher turned black, or
Yep.
Hank Pym hit his wife, and you're like, this isn't good, dude.
No.
Stuff wouldn't fly nowadays?
Well,
I did put my foot in my mouth talking to Ron Mars about the Girlfriend in a Refrigerator, because I asked him about it, and I was like, how do you feel on it? And you could see the, and I'm like,
yeah, let's not talk about that.
and he's good friends with like Gail Simone now. Like he talked about that, with it. So it was like we recovered from it, but there was that moment where I'm like, shouldn't have brought it up. I just should not have brought that book up.
Oh crap. Exactly.
But it's an important moment to me. Like, Like
Yeah,
it is
absolutely.
important, like, and that's the thing, like, even, I mean, it determined who Hank Pym was for even now, right? 40 years later almost.
Yep, we still
You know,
talk about it. We still talk about him doing that.
it's still talking about, and it's one hit, and it's one panel, and they make excuses for it, but like, Jim Shooter, like it went to press. Like they're like, "Oh, we tried to do this." It's like, dude, you could have just like not had a panel there. There's any number of like a
Absolutely.
billion things.
Yeah, I mean, somebody was editing. Hey, we could have. I think we're gonna leave this part out, but
We didn't have
Yeah.
Beatles.
Like you could have just like black box slap,
Mhm.
or
Yeah,
you know what I
that
mean?
would have
Like
worked.
that would have worked, and it would have been less than like the Marvel action pose of
Yep.
smacking.
Off-screen slaps.
Well, I think that, like you were saying, it's important that that stuff's out there, whether we agree
Yeah.
with it, disagree with it, whatever. Like, it's an important part of comic book history.
Yeah.
A lot of times, people are only kind of chasing like those big events or first appearances or
Yeah.
whatever. But it's kind of cool to have stuff that went sideways as well in
Yeah.
your collection, because
Yeah,
it's part of comic book history.
and that's the thing to me is like I used to do a podcast called Comics Are Stupid, and it wasn't like pejorative toward comics. It was like the first episode we did was about the swimsuit issues, like how big that was in the 90s, right? So I have a sizable collection of swimsuit specials.
Mhm.
And they're fun and campy and a little ridiculous.
Mhm.
But they're not bad, they're salacious, but like not as salacious as like some Rob Liefeld or some, J. Scott Campbell covers. And I'm not
Yeah.
insulting them either. Just like, it's like, oh, it's swimsuits. Like, yeah, but you had like everybody was like mostly naked. You had Colossus, you had Wolverine. Like
Mhm.
it wasn't just like, oh, it's just the sexy ladies. It's like, no, swimsuit special. Everybody's in a swimsuit.
Yeah, everybody's got a G-string on
Yeah,
anyway, so
the,
what difference does it make?
Exactly. And I think those are like beautiful things to see in comics. Like even the mistakes, but like, Girlfriend in a Refrigerator has like become something that's like eyeballed, right? People
Yep.
talk about that and the importance of not necessarily that event, even not knowing what the event's referring to, just that
Mhm.
like, using a girlfriend as a way to move the main character ahead, the death of a significant other, usually a woman. And I
Mhm.
find that pretty interesting, like, I mean, at least for me. I don't know. Maybe it's not totally, cool, but like it's good that it's not cool and we can talk about it. So
Yes,
owning
absolutely.
those bits of history are important to me in my like what I hunt after in my collection. That and I also get any like turtle knockoffs. I'm
Oh,
in
okay.
like it was a prepubescent hamsters
Yeah, the
and like
hamsters and the
There was a Zatoichi Sword of the Blind Walrus. I forgot what it's called, but I own that book too.
oh god, yeah, there's so many of those. I bought a collection a few years back that had it was like 3 long boxes, and then one of the long boxes, like the first, I don't know, 16 or 17 books was nothing but each one of those turtle knockoffs. I
Yeah,
was
and
very
I
excited.
love them. I love those because like the turtles at the end of the day are a knockoff of Daredevil,
Yep,
right?
absolutely.
And so I actually have my own knockoff of Turtles book. Like I haven't found the
Oh,
artist
cool.
yet, but I have it written, and it's I think it's going to be pretty fun. But it's the event after. So you have the truck hits Daredevil,
Mhm.
and then he loses sight, and then the canister of the ooze goes into the sewer and does the turtles, right, and
Yes.
turns them. Mine's after that, so mine is this continuous journey of this little silly canister. So that's mine. So
That's
it's
awesome. Well,
um,
I definitely can't wait to read that. That sounds like a lot of fun.
I think it'll be funny. Fun, funny. It's a martial arts book, but I've written the first few issues of that one. I have tons of so those canisters behind me are full of things I've written. Let's
Oh,
see,
okay.
mostly either gear and or stuff I've written back there. So
Wow.
It's a lot of stuff.
Yeah, a good amount of stuff there.
I hand write everything because I'm old and curmudgeon-y. So
Nothing wrong
um,
with that.
I hand write, then I type up, and what's that?
He
Sorry,
said you're talking to two old and curmudgeon guys, so we completely understand that.
it's hand write it. So I hand write, I type it up, then I print it out, I hand edit, and then I type that up, and then I repeat the process over and over and over again until till they tell me I have to stop. So
I really like that. I like that aspect of it. I'm with you. I write as well. I'm definitely not to any level of acclaim like you are there.
acclaim.
I haven't published any projects or anything. I just like
Yeah.
to write as well. But I kind of the ideas just flow a little bit better for
Yeah.
me when I'm handwriting. It's something different than typing on my phone or typing on my laptop or whatever. Even I mean, I haven't tried a
100%.
typewriter, but maybe that works a little better too. But yeah, something about just getting it out on the pen and paper. The ideas just kind of flow.
Yeah.
Especially when I'm writing dialogue, it just
Mhm.
flows much more naturally for me.
It's just easier to see.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's easier to adjust notes. Like when I'm writing something, I'll be writing ahead as
Mhm.
well, going, okay, it's got to go into this, and I'll make a note for it there, like, oh, or a line I'm coming up with, like, oh, it'll bounce back to this, cool. And I can do that by hand. Whereas if I have like, I'm doing it on the computer, it's like, oh, I better have a notepad up and alt tab. And yeah. And so for me, 100%, I'm a dude who likes it handwritten. And my wife, it drives her mad because I also don't throw them away.
Yeah, you got paper everywhere.
So I have stacks. Like I have a series I'm working on called or well, it's not a series. It's a script called Hardwired Crush, and I think this many copies right now
Wow.
that I've printed, and because it's a 90-page script, so you
Okay.
print it, you do your notes, and then you type it back up and print it again. And I've iterated that 8 or 9 or 20 times, something like that, and so you end up with a bunch of copies of that. And she's like, "Well, just throw them away." I was like, but then I wouldn't have them. And she's
Yeah,
like,
yeah. I mean, you got to keep your hard copies.
What if I need to go back to it? Refer to it again.
so I did compromise. So Crim Sisters. By the way, the original title was Stars and Garters, hence why
Oh, okay.
you'll hear me occasionally go like call it Stars and Garters. That's not the name of the book. It's called The Crim Sisters. But but it was recent enough that if you look at my Instagram, when I first announced it, I announced it under Stars and Garters. And
Okay.
then I was talking with my friends, and they were like, "Yeah, we don't like that title." And my wife's like, "Yeah, it's not a good title." I was like, "No, but like, because it's ladies in space, stars and garters." And she's like, "Yeah, I get it. I don't like that title." And I'm like,
I
and
like
then
it for maybe you put it out and then you've got like a trade of volume 2, and that's the
yeah, that's the Stars and Garters
Yeah.
like section. And I actually thought about
That's the
naming
story
a later chapter that, because like each of my chapters I have named for it. And yeah, even my artist Wayne Loudon, who he wanted to actually be here today, but the colorist actually, Kim Melevek, which I'm sure I'm butchering her name. She's doing the colors on it, and she just wasn't feeling up to it today. So we just kind of,
sure.
they were like, oh, do it without us. And I was like, cool.
Hey, no worries. We'll take you. You got looks like we can tell, just by reading your book and then what you've got lined up in here, everything, how passionate you are about the project, about getting it out there to the world and everything. And it's written so. I love the way this is written. It's such a different tone from what you see in mainstream comics right now. And that kind of brings us into, like, of course, we had questions for you.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so we'll kind of break them down. I mean,
I haven't talked to anyone who hasn't read it who I don't personally know. So
Yeah,
I'm so excited. It's crazy.
Yeah, and look, a lot of our questions are going to be kind of not specific to the story. I don't know how much of it you want us to spoil or whatever. So we'll try to keep it to a minimum.
I'll even spoil a few things for you for the next, like, I saw issues.
We'll let you spoil. We won't spoil.
Okay, book 3s are, well, I don't mind even spoiling book 1. Any information you find out on book 1, totally zen. I don't. Book 1 is that, like, getting all the ingredients ready. You know what I mean? Like we haven't made the stew yet, but you're cutting up the carrots and you're getting everything into, not even into the pot. You just gathering them. So for me, like, we aren't even getting into like the meat and potatoes of the actual like story until like book 2, book 3. Then we start seeing, like, that is issue 1 is the tame issue. Issue 2 and 3 are going to be like even wilder. So
great. Yeah, definitely. I love that you mentioned meat and potatoes. Bob and I, for the last few episodes, have been talking about, obviously that portion of a comic when you're when you're reading a book and you kind of get, you get started and then you get into the meat and potatoes of the story. That's an analogy that we've used a couple of times. Of course, not original to us by any means. That's something that's been out there for a long time. But Bob and I were talking about a book that a lot of people were complaining about, diversity and inclusion and stuff like that. And of course, we are we are not opposed to any of that.
Yeah.
We actually support that. But so Bob had come up with the potatoes and potatoes portion of the show. So that's something that we always talk about. So yeah, cool that you brought
That's
up
like
that.
vegetarian friendly version. Like that's the vegetarian
Absolutely.
stew, the potatoes and potatoes. No, I
Yeah.
love it. I mean, I tend, I write to whatever character,
Mhm.
I lean towards. So like, She and Tilly Mace, which was my first book,
Mhm.
is about a gladiatorial mud wrestler, a 6 foot and change, super muscular woman. And when I first wrote the first draft of it, I gave it to I told my wife about it. I'm like, yeah, I'm working on this idea I had called about a gladiatorial mud wrestler. And she's like, I don't like that. Like she immediately, I was like, no, trust me, it's cool. And she's like, I don't like that idea. And I was like, no, this is a woman's rights book. It's about like the struggle and so it's not perfect for that, but and maybe it's not my story, but it is because my artist who's very much into that it was Michelle Millette on that book.
Mhm.
She was very much into like this idea of like making like let's make a biracial character, let's make a a female character, let's like not make her beautiful. And for me, like she's bald, so even though she has pink hair in the picture,
Mhm.
she actually is just wearing a wig, because
Okay.
you've got to like pretend like you're feminine, but you also want these giant Amazonian women. It's basically WWE in mud, but with real weapons.
Yes.
And so it's all like prepped beforehand and it's all fake. But you still have to be like top of your physical game. It's not like 1980s, early 80s wrestling where you could be like, big chunky dude, like just you have to be like a bodybuilder. And so I always try like writing my characters like that. Like the Crim Sisters is based on. I'm a sucker for those like 1960s biker girl like
Yes.
movies and stuff.
Mhm.
I just rewatched Switchblade Sisters. I love that like the 1950s style of like how everything was perfect. You saw it out at like Edward Scissorhands, but there's like a
Mhm.
ton of media, including my own, that like brings up how insidious and dark that world is. Like I actually just rewatched Fido. I don't know if you guys ever saw that. That came out in '06.
Was
It's
that the Fido?
it's a
No.
zombie movie.
Okay. It's like a
So
short film?
no, it's a feature
No?
film. It's got
What am I
what's her
I'm
face
thinking
from
of
The
Frankenweenie
Matrix.
or something, I guess, but
What's her face from The Matrix? Why am I blanking
Carrie-Anne
on her name?
Moss?
Yeah, Carrie Ann Moss. She's in
Okay.
that. And it's about like a 1950s after a zombie apocalypse, and so they're living in these gated communities,
Mhm.
and they have to, but they have like zombies enslaved with neck things,
Uh-huh.
and so they're using. It's a brilliant movie. Nobody ever saw it, but it's all 1950s, but like absolutely horrifying because you have these zombies everywhere,
Yes.
and they're basically
Wonderful.
enslaved. And the question is like, are they still alive? It's
Mhm.
like I don't know. So are they enslaving alive people, or are they just using corpses? And it's actually a really cool flick. But a lot of people. Another one was Crybaby,
Oh,
like
oh, yes, I'm very familiar with
John
Crybaby.
Waters' Crybaby.
Yeah, that's an
Same thing with
interesting
the.
movie.
I love that. Absolutely. I mean, John Waters is the man. Like,
Mhm,
has been
mhm.
one of the greats. Can't make movies anymore because like that budget of film is gone.
Yep.
But he was. Anyway, sorry about that, guys.
No, please.
I tangent.
You're
Tangents
good.
completely welcomed. Absolutely. We love it.
We go off on so many tangents.
Yeah, we go off on
Let's.
a lot of tangents, and I think that look, as a listener to podcasts and listeners
Yeah.
to interviews and stuff like that, it's really important to us to kind of look. Anybody can bring on a creator to their
Mhm.
show and kind of talk about their project. That's something that a lot of people do, and there's nothing wrong with it.
Yeah.
It's obviously a good form of entertainment, a good way to get you interested in a project or whatever. We kind of like to be more involved like in what's going on in the process, what's going
Yeah.
on in that creator's mind to get them to the point to where they create. Like we like to kind of offer like a bridge to our listeners who
Yeah.
might be interested in getting into writing or
Yeah.
creating
Cool.
maybe it might be art, whatever form of media that they're interested in. um it's important to hear these things because a lot of us, it's very intimidating to look.
Yeah.
Even something like setting up a podcast for the first time was very intimidating to me. I thought I'd never get it out there. If I did, I sure as hell wouldn't have anybody listen to it. And here we are. We're quite a few episodes in. We've got a pretty good listener base. And it's probably the same thing with you. You got into writing, whatever you're writing. Looks like you're kind of all over the place. You definitely write comics and then you write other things as well.
Yeah.
So that's really cool. But we'd like a peek into your mind and into your process of creation and into what inspires you. That's more or less a lot of the things that we like to talk about here.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
So yes, feel free. Any
I mean,
tangent you got, we'll take.
I mean, if you want to know, like, so process is, I treat it like work. I'm very fortunate. My wife has a real job. She's a
She's got the real job.
she's got a master's in math. She's a
Nice.
product owner for a banking software company.
Great.
I'm the first to admit that I'm in a very privileged position in having the time. So I
Right.
treat it like work, Monday to Friday. It's what I do. I'm working on, either writing or, we're trying to get this YouTube channel thing we're doing right now.
Yes.
With this other it's another partner of mine named Francisco Ruiz Velasco. He's a concept artist,
Okay.
and he and I are doing this little show. Well, we're doing this little YouTube show cartoon called Warriors of the Septic Seas.
Yes, and I looked at that. I think you had 3 episodes up.
We have 3 full episodes up. Yeah,
Yep.
not a lot of views, but it's a like 3-minute cartoon. It's like it's not for and it's about guys riding poop, which I think like it's going to turn a lot of people off. But that's okay. Like, but for my process, the big one is like, I mean, the best way I can call it, it's like, so I was raised Catholic. I'm not Catholic, but I was raised Catholic.
Sure.
And it's that guilty compulsion. So I don't have a choice. If I don't write, if I don't feel like I've spent my time writing or creating the way I want to create, I feel guilty.
Yep.
And no matter what I do, no matter what distraction, and mind you, I am a man of distractions. Like I play Magic the Gathering, I collect comic books, I collect toys. I enjoy spending time watching movies with my wife. I met her at the movies. Like I love all the distractions in this life, but if I do not get my work done, I feel unbelievably guilty, and it won't go away. Like nothing I can do will go away for it. So for me, like, and so many people I've worked with. So I used to work as an assistant cameraman in film. Like that was a big thing that I was doing for a long time.
Sorry, we're gonna get a dog appearance here. We'll mute our mic so you can keep talking.
No, it's totally cool. I mean, it doesn't bother me. I don't have pets. My last pet was a tarantula we had for a few years, and she passed away. Her name was Gwen Stacy. Yeah, but she just passed away like 2 years ago, but we had her for like 6 or 7 years. We had her for a little while. Just not pet people. Like we tried, but she and I are we like being able to leave when we want to, and so but the big that's the thing. It's like if we want to go out for a weekend or just go out in the evening, we just don't want to have to think about it. And so we've thought about getting another pet. Anyway, back to so for the other thing is, I always keep I don't have one. Of course, I say I always keep one on me, and then I don't have one. Well, I'm at my desk, so I don't need to have one, but I keep these little notepads in my butt. Not up the butt, just in the pocket of the butt.
Okay, no.
I mean, wherever you want to keep it, that,
Sure.
and I always carry a pen. And I've tried sending myself notes on the phone, but I never check them. But my little notebook, if I come up with an idea for a story or for like just even a line, like I'm constantly working on extra stories. Like right now, I've got a pile. I think like 3 or 4 books I'm working on currently, side by side with what I'm doing with Crim Sisters. So just in the writing portion, writing, rewriting. I'm working on one I originally wrote it as a novel. It wasn't working, and so I'm writing it as a 1-act play, but it's this sci-fi. It's a silly, stupid sci-fi thing where it's a guy who it's my version of like planetary colonization. Because I think that's like the whole idea of it, of like, oh, we'll send you to Mars. Like, would you go to Mars, or would you go to another universe if you could? It's like, yeah, but you're never gonna get there, bro. Like, oh, we're gonna cryogenically freeze you. Bullshit.
You're dying on the way.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, or we have a pod, and it's everybody lives there. It's like, okay, so your great 40 generations down grandchildren might make it there. Got it. Okay, if you're lucky. The truth is, you're not gonna make it there, and so it's about a dude who's a clone of the dude. And so, like, I was like, well, we might not be able to send people over, but we can send the stuff to make people and the memories of people. And so, anyway, it's I'm working on it. It's all working. I got piles of things I'm working on.
That sounds like a lot of fun. I definitely wanted to ask you. So So kind of how we wanted to start it was we definitely wanted to hear about your history in comics, and it sounds like you
Yeah.
have like a rich history in comics. And what I mean by that is, of course, like collecting or
Yeah.
reading.
Yeah.
I look, Bob and I are kids of the '80s. Like
Yeah.
we're in our late 30s at the very least, and
40 years old now. So
okay,
40s.
well, Bob's 40, I guess, but
on, yeah.
yeah. So look, like
Yeah.
for somebody like me, I remember, going to the newsstand, the local shops,
Yeah.
and waiting for that Robin miniseries to come out, and just that was my first venture into collecting, and of course, Bob's been around reading Archie comics since the late 40s or whatever, but we kind of want to know, what got
Yeah.
you into comics in the first place, what got you reading and then into collecting and all of that.
No, okay, that's a funny question. Not funny. Cool. Okay, yeah, I got it. I know the answer for that, so that one
Okay.
works out really well for me. So I've always owned comics.
Mhm.
Like I feel like no matter where in my life, I've always at least had some comic books. Like,
Okay.
my father, when he was before he had me, he lived in Okinawa when he was in the Air Force.
Oh, cool.
He always laments that when he moved away from there, he gave away his pile of comics, his giant pile of comics
Always.
from the late 70s, right?
Mhm.
And he always laments that when he talks, like if a comic comes up, he's like, "Oh yeah, I had that comic. I had that comic." I'm like,
Oh yeah,
"Thanks,
Hulk
Dad."
181. I had about 12 of those.
Okay,
Burnt
no, actually,
Super
so you want
Tiger.
to
Yeah.
the funniest one for me is his wife prior to my mother. They've been married for 40 something years, my mother and him. But
Mhm.
my mother and my father have been married 40 years. But before that, he was married, and her father was supposed to give him a Superman 1
Oh.
before
Oh
she was a
no.
cheating dirtbag, and
Sure.
he divorced her. But he was like, I was like, why didn't you just stay for the book?
Yeah, exactly.
Wait, get the book, then leave. And
Exactly.
he's like,
He's like, it wasn't worth it then.
it wasn't, yeah, it was, and it was, I mean, I always bring that up for, like, I play Magic the Gathering, and
Mhm.
I remember seeing ads for Black Lotuses for $50.
Yep.
And I was like, I'm not, I was working at McDonald's 4.40 an hour before taxes. Like, I'm not spending 2 days working hoping to buy a Black Lotus, this card for this kids card game that's gonna, it's not gonna be worth it in 20 years.
Sure.
So I always own, but yeah, so I always own comics, and my father was always like, into comics, collecting. Like, I remember a really special time for us was when I was young, was collecting all those Spider-Man. I think it was 30th anniversary. The
Yep.
hologram covers, like the
Uh-huh.
first appearance of Spider-Man Black 2099, the black
Yep.
cover one. The red, like,
Yep.
and we were going to the comic shops, and so that's one of those, like, that was the first collecting moment I remember, like,
Okay.
where it was like it, and those books aren't even worth that much. The black one's finally going up because 2099 is about to show up in the second Spider-Verse movie, which masterpiece. The first one was a masterpiece. I'm
Oh
hoping for
yes,
the second
God.
one.
Can't wait to see the second one. Jesus.
Cannot wait. So like jacked for that one. But that was the first moment collecting. But that's also tied in. So I stopped buying floppies for almost 10 years.
Mhm.
For about 10 years. And it's tied in around that time. I'm a kid. I'm 13 years old, something along those lines. And I have, like, let's be honest, I can convince my parents to buy me like 1, 2, 3 comics a month if I'm lucky.
Yeah, sure.
Right. I mean, if I'm lucky, I get that second and third one at the Naval Exchange, but let's be honest, I'm probably getting like 1 comic a month.
Mhm.
So at that time, I was a big, we were Batman fans. Everyone loves Batman, right?
Sure.
Okay.
Especially then, absolutely.
Exactly. Batman's back gets broken. Okay, cool. Does it get broken in the Batman comic? No, it gets broken in like 8 comic books,
Mhm.
right? Like, you're having to read, the Robin book, the Batman book, the detective comic book,
All the tie-ins to get the
all the
story.
ones, right? And as a so I love me some Batman. Oh, Green Lantern's really cool. Cool. You want to find out what happened to Green Lantern? Hope you're buying Green Lantern and Superman and blah blah blah.
Mhm.
Because you need to find out what happened at the end of Superman, so you know what happened to was it Coast City, so you know that why he became Parallax. I hope you're buying all those books.
Yep.
Okay. And then it's like, oh, look at you. You're covered in hair. Your father's covered in hair. You love Wolverine. Of course I love Wolverine. Well, I hope you're buying all the comics so you know what happened to Wolverine's skeleton,
Absolutely.
and so it became this situation where I was like, dude, I can't read these comics. Like, I can't
Mhm.
buy comic books fast enough to keep up with any story, much less, all these different stories. So I just, like, stepped back. I was like, I don't buy comics anymore. I'm done. And for about 10 years, I didn't buy comics. And then my wife and I met her in 2002.
Mhm.
And for like that first Christmas, I got her a Harley Quinn comic off the floppy off the Kroger's shelf. I got her a Harley Quinn a comic, and I bought her a Catwoman comic. And then she got into comic books. She got really huge into cross-gen.
Oh,
So
wow. Okay.
so her big collecting thing is to collect every cross-gen comic. Like
Mhm.
everyone, and she's 2/3 of the way there.
Wow.
Well, it's nice because they're finite, right? They
Yeah.
went out of business. So you only have like 700 or 800 books you have to like collect.
Yeah.
And she's most of the way.
It's not like picking up every DC or Marvel or even Image or Valiant.
No.
Yeah.
Well, and one of her goals early on was I'm going to buy every Harley Quinn book. She's like, I'm going to buy every book where Harley Quinn appears.
Yeah.
And that used to be doable in the early 2000s,
Mhm,
right? Before Harley Quinn became
Yeah. Not gonna
yeah.
happen.
And so she she has all the keys for Harley Quinn. But now it's like it's impossible to buy every single book, every single cover, every Harley Quinn piece. So she's like, I've got my keys. I'm gonna sit there and then we'll buy so she's just been hunting cross-gen now for hers. But yeah, but buying her those floppies insidiously snuck me into buying comic books again, collecting comics. And
Mhm.
now I'm I've got what I consider a decent collection. I mean, it depends on what like, is it the number? Is it the quantity? Either one.
Or the
What's your
quality, or
quantity, Dan?
yeah. Well, mine. We're not going to talk about my problems here. I mean, it's
Okay,
like a
so
crack
I'll throw
habit.
in one number out. So, actually, I'll throw a couple things out. One is moving the collection, because we moved from Austin, Texas. That's where we lived up until about 6.5, 7 months ago. We moved in July.
Mhm.
And then the other one is so I'm getting rid of about 3,000 books
Wow. Okay.
because I want to cut my collection a little bit.
Mhm.
But the big number is that so I have to move the collection, and there are certain boxes that you bring in the car with you,
Yeah.
right?
Oh yeah.
You
Of
know,
course.
you have your like 3 short boxes of
Mhm.
books that you're like, I trust no one with these. I
Yes.
barely trust myself. They're at the center of the car. Everything is
Absolutely.
built around those books to
Yeah. If
protect
another
those.
massive flood happens, these are right next to me, and I'm holding them as I swim or something. Yeah.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I have one of those fireproof, waterproof bags for
Yeah.
them. Like this is what you. They make those. They have them on Amazon, short
Mhm.
boxes that are like fireproof
Oh
short
wow.
boxes.
I need
So
some
I've
of
got one of
those.
those. Um, and but so we have that. But I was a mean bastard. I tipped well. Let me say that I tipped well.
Mhm.
But for the movers, I had to I originally was going to get the short box, wrap it in plastic, tape it, and then I was going to have them move it like that, right?
Mhm.
And you know, but the more I looked at it, I was like, I don't know if I can trust the movers. I
Mhm.
just don't know if I can trust the movers. So I go to because and thank goodness I didn't. Let me preface what I'm about to say with thank goodness I didn't. So I went to U-Haul and I got their bigger box, and I put 4 short boxes in each
Wow.
of those boxes, and I think it was like 15 of those boxes. Um, so those boxes weigh over like 100 pounds, and I had like 15 of those.
Absolutely. Easy.
And, and they came in like all my boxes came in destroyed.
Oh
Like, luckily,
God.
I only lost a few items. They did steal a couple of DSs that I had in a clear box. Like someone obviously broke into it and took the DSs out. So
Man.
that sucks. But like, I hate that like I put them through having to move like 100 and something pound boxes,
Mhm.
and that sucks. But if I hadn't, I don't even know how my collection would like have shown up. It would have been destroyed. I really have no doubt that it would have just been in garbage condition by the time I got it, if books weren't missing from there. But the whole collection made it. So
Well, that's very good news. And look, you say you feel bad. I completely understand. I had a similar experience from moving from my last home to the one that I currently live in. Now I rent out 2 storage units to house
yeah,
my comic book collection,
yeah,
but in having those movers, look, you talked about tipping. I tipped mine very well too.
yeah,
But they're there to lift things. That's what they're
yeah,
there for.
yeah.
They're there to do the things that we don't want to do. So don't feel too bad.
Well, and I remember reaching that age where it was like I can't offer enough beer and pizza to like subject my friends to this.
Yes. Oh
Like
yes,
you're
absolutely.
just like I have to throw money at this problem.
Yep.
Luckily we're doing well enough that we could do that, thankfully. But
Yes.
But yeah, we moved from Austin about like 7 months ago, and other than we lost probably about $1,000 worth of stuff. Like, admittedly, our Roomba didn't make it. A couple of
Ah,
chairs didn't make it.
mhm.
A couple of DSs didn't make it. But yeah, yeah. So that's me in collecting. And so for me, like, we use pre-pandemic, we were hitting 3, 4, 5, 6 cons a year. Just
Great.
going through the long boxes.
Mhm, mhm.
And the hunt is beautiful. I have allergies, so I have to pop allergy pills before I do it because the dust is gonna kill me.
Yep.
But like, even now, my eyes are all like squinty because I'm like, didn't take my pill. Okay. But going through it, it's fun, and I don't know, like, even if it's like for me, my wife always laughs because her collection's smaller than mine, but worth as much as mine, because she collects books that actually, like, people give a shit about, and I'm like,
Ones that have
but
resale value.
this is a blind walrus with a samurai sword, and
It's
she's
so
like,
cool.
I'm
Yeah,
like, it's
well, I think, look, I can at least relate. I'm completely guilty of that. I love
Mhm.
picking up weird off the wall stuff. Um, I want to talk about your writing for a second now that
Okay,
we
sure, yeah.
understand your collecting a little bit. So you seem like you've been into writing for a long time. Is this like a lifelong endeavor for you? Have you always written? Is it something you got into at a specific age? And of course, I'll have follow up questions for that as
Yeah.
well. But I'd like to hear your experience in writing.
Okay, this is one I'm gonna, I think I have to, like, pull the band-aid off this. So,
Yeah.
I've always been an avid reader. My mother taught me to
Mhm.
read before I even went to kindergarten. She
Yes.
was like, my mother was a migrant worker.
Oh wow. Okay.
And so, like, for her, like, she, 8th grade, and she was out of school. Like, that
Hmm,
was that.
hmm.
And so she really always pushed um reading, arithmetic, all these things. She wanted me ready for everything. And then I became a bum. But but she was very much into educating me. So I've always read, and I read books, I read comics, everything. Um, but I'd never really written until I was like, okay, this is gonna be horrible. But, like, I think my first writing for fun was a Mighty Max fan fiction.
Look, a lot of people, I
That's
would
where you
say a
have to start.
majority of people that I've talked to start off with fan fiction. That's just kind of where it goes.
Well,
My,
the thing.
mine too. Mine was Twilight Zone fan fiction. So hey, I'm with you.
Well, I think a big part is, like, creating your own universe, creating your own world is
Hmm.
the daunting part, right?
Yes. Hmm.
You can create a character, you're like, okay, cool, I can work within these parameters,
Yep.
and then I can build from there. Like, so for me, I don't read fan fiction. This has never gotten published.
Sure.
Luckily, I wrote it in pencil, so years later, I can barely even read it, and I'm like, yes, like, dissolve more, eat away at that paper. I don't want this in the universe when I'm gone. Like, that's
Uh,
what I want. And so, but it's, I think, a bit daunting, and I think that's why it's, like, easy to go fan fiction. But, like, I also played a lot of, like, role playing games like D&D and Robotech and
mhm.
all these things when I was young, and those led me into, like, loving creating my own universe and amalgamating those ideas, and going, like, oh, wouldn't it be cool if Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat had a crossover, and then
Mhm.
they had kids, and those kids did this, and you do this, and it allows you to, like, move on and create your own worlds from that. And you realize, like Chantilly Mace, I had that idea in when I was a kid in high school, and it was
Mhm.
originally like, oh, the idea was like, what if guns never got invented? And I
Yes, and
was
I,
like,
I love that concept when I read it. Just that short little, I don't know if we're supposed to call that like a log line or what,
no,
but that short
yeah,
little synopsis there about the girl in the universe where the guns were never invented. Such an
and and
interesting concept.
and that was the thing. And so I ran with it, and, like, as a kid, you're like, I'm thinking, like, and what if they had superpowers, right? And
Yeah.
so they had, like, superpowers. They're like the fucking X-Men of this
Hmm,
universe, right?
hmm.
But as an adult, like, I was like, I think there's something there in that idea, right, of guns never being invented. But, like, how would that world actually be? So as a kid, you're just going derivative, right? You're building off of what you know. I know X-Men,
Hmm.
and I know no guns. Okay, cool. Those are easy. But as an adult, you go into going like, well, what would have happened to the United States if we didn't have guns?
Hmm.
It's like, oh, cool. Well, Japan would have probably, like, when we went over there with what's his face? Why am I blanking on his name? He has the same name as the former governor of Texas, or what? Anyway, anyway,
No,
you go over
all good.
to Japan, and instead of having, like, the ability to, like, subjugate them and go like, you're gonna trade with us because we have guns,
Hmm, hmm.
suddenly they're like, no, we have the same weapons as you, and they
Yeah.
chase them right back, and they take over California and start coming over, and then the indigenous people of the United States aren't suddenly subjected to the same kind of like death and destruction. So
Mhm.
places like I said it in Austin, but I had it as a city state,
Yep.
surrounded by a wall, afraid of everything on the other side of the wall because they're scary people. If you see something, say something to the native people, and and so it becomes much more like almost like mega cities, and Judge Dredd, right, where it's like these
Yes.
little areas separated by really long swaths, and
Yeah, sure. Like
then you
small factions and all that. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, you have tribes, you have war
Mhm.
tribes, you have peace tribes, you have people just trying to get by, and then it was like, okay, well, what character? And I'm running through the cool ones, like, oh, what if it's a dude and he's like, and I was working at Best Buy at the time, and he's like, what is the Geek Squad in this world? And I was like, what if they have to go to like remote like areas, and he's like, he's got, and I'm watching Mad Max, and I'm like, oh, so they're driving the car, but then you need a dude on top like fighting off the people on the motorcycles, and I'm like,
Yes.
it's cool, but I don't want cool. Like, what about like what's their entertainment? And then I'm like, oh well, they wouldn't want what we would normally watch. They would want something more violent, right? The
Mhm.
normal and like normal people can't even own guns in that world, or not guns. They can't own weapons. It's much more like feudal Japan, where they're having to use like farm implements, right?
Yes.
And so you would have like a select few who had it, and then everyone else is just enjoying warfare. And I was like, well, it'd be funny if it's like they over sexualize, over violentize, like WWE.
Mhm.
So you put it in mud, and then you give them weapons, and but it's not like it's a pleasant experience for her either. Like, you watch a movie like The Wrestler, and you realize like what this is doing to their bodies. So she's jacked up on steroids.
Yep.
She's dealing with like hair loss. She's dealing with like taking all these drugs she shouldn't be ingesting in her body just to kind of get by. But her father also has like complete control of her money because she's an unmarried woman.
Mhm.
And then she's afraid of getting married and then just transferring that over because suddenly the ability to like be a woman who's independent doesn't exist when you don't have guns. She can't
Mhm.
just shoot her husband, or at least
Yeah.
that's my idea on it. And
Sure.
so, there's no equalizer. Whether we like it or like, don't get me wrong, I'm not a gun nut. Okay,
Mhm.
let me preface that. But as a tool for what it can like take non-soldiers and put them on a more equal footing with a soldier
Mhm.
has historically done certain things. It's allowed people to go like, oh yeah, you're a soldier, I'm a soldier, or I'm not a soldier, but I have a gun and I can shoot you in the face.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
it equalized historically. Um, and not having that weapon there, I think, changed things. And so that's what happened. And now I tangented and forgot where we started. Um,
Well, no, you're fine. I mean, we were just talking about you getting into writing in your first projects and everything. So that
yeah.
was definitely,
Oh yeah. So
yeah,
yeah, that
kind of where we wanted to go with that. So that's perfect.
yeah. But
I
yeah, I went to film school, so that would
Okay.
actually
Oh
be also
wow.
from there.
Great.
I
Yeah, and
so
I
actually
saw this trailer for your film Flutter.
Flutter, I co-wrote the
Yes.
story on that one. Yeah,
Oh
yeah, yeah.
man, yeah. Very
That was the
very interesting.
biggest flick we did.
Mhm.
I've got another feature that we shot. So that movie, okay. So yeah. So the guy who directed that, I went to film school with.
Okay.
He and I, and he's a spectacular director. Directed another movie. I'm gonna plug his old film called Rainbow's End, which I think
Mhm.
is a masterpiece. It's probably one of my favorite movies I ever worked on. It was the first thing I ever did, and I drove the van behind the bus on their way to California. So he
Oh
calls
wow.
it the Muppet movie, but with East Texans. Instead, it's a very fun, very cool. They built a stage on top of it because no one would book it. So
Mhm.
so this band built a stage, and the band claims they built their drum kit from pieces of the space shuttle
Oh
that
wow.
had crashed in Nacogdoches because that's where we went to college.
Uh-huh.
And one guy believes it's 1970. Another is a gay baton twirling sorcerer. Another guy's a cockfighter who wants to bring his cocks out west so he can put them in the movies and they become big stars and he can make his thing like that. And so they get into this school bus and then drive from East Texas all the way to California to make it. And so he and I been really good friends for a very long time. We and so he dealt with some personal problem like family issues,
Mhm.
and so he came to me with this idea, and then I pitched him ideas back and forth, and that's kind of our process. He and I've written I think 3 or 4 films together now. I know at least 3.
Wow.
But we wrote that one. We had before that though. We were working on a movie called Marcus Infinity. It hasn't gotten released yet, but because we haven't finished it like 12 years later.
Wow.
And it was about a vampire, a guy who claims he's a vampire, and he hires a film crew and says that he can't die until he becomes famous.
Mhm.
And so he tries becoming YouTube famous like 12 years ago. But he's this like kind of overweight guy. He has no fangs. He has no proof of his, he can go out in the sunlight and everything like that. But he claims that he's a vampire, and then and so we shot like 90% of that film, and then funding showed up for Flutter, and we kind of abandoned that one because here's the movie with Glenn Morshower was attached to that, who
Mhm.
he was in Transformers, he was in what was that? A bunch of stuff actually. Was it Modern Warfare video games?
Okay.
He's in. If you watch him, if you'll see him, you're like, oh, I know him. He's in like 40
Yeah,
movies. I know
sure.
that guy.
One of those guys.
He's military through and through.
Yeah, always plays it, and he does such a great job.
Mhm.
But he was onto it, and then we had Jesse Plemons from he was in Breaking Bad at that
Mhm.
time, and so we had a lot of really cool people in it, and so money had shown up, and it was like, let's pursue that, and we pursued that, and
Sure.
that meant the other movie we made had to get put in the back burner, and so he and I've worked on those kind of things, and so and we have one other script that we have completely like haven't developed anything from yet, but
Mhm.
he was someone like that. But yeah, we had met in film school. I met my wife in film school too, but she wasn't going for film. She was getting a real degree. But I warned her.
Getting a
I
real one.
warned her. I was like, I'm gonna make movies that nobody watches, and I'm not gonna make any money. And she's like,
She's like,
that's
that's cool.
okay.
I'll handle the money part.
I'll handle the thing.
I like that you point out the fact that in getting into the process of writing and producing content and all of that, a lot of people kind of forget that like a lot of times we're just kind of privy to what big Hollywood's doing, or big names out there in the universe, these big writers and everything, the Joss Whedons, the James
Yeah.
Gunn's, the whatever. A lot of times people are juggling so many different projects and just looking for the outlet to get that out,
Yeah.
to get that, in a way, like you were saying with the films or with this as a Kickstarter and stuff, funded so you can completely realize that project, get it
Yeah.
out to the masses, and then work on the next volume of it, or
Yeah.
work on the next thing that you're doing or whatever. How does something like that, I guess, let me think of the proper way to phrase this. How do you deal with something like that? Because that has to be very hard. I know, like when I write something, and again, I no claim whatsoever. I haven't
Yeah.
produced it or published anything at all. But I know when I'm writing, I have things that I'm working on, and I have multiple things that I'm working on, and then something usually takes precedent over something else. I'm
Yeah.
usually like, hey, here's the thing. This is the thing. These other things are cool, and I'll get to those later. But this is the thing. And then you think of something, and you say to yourself, well, shit, now I'm going back to this thing because I have an idea for this, or now
Yeah.
I think I can fully realize this project, or in your case, now I have funding for this. How do you go back and forth and juggle those things and still engulf yourself in those universes and get them out there to talk about them?
So I think this might okay, so the way I met Wayne is the
Mhm.
artist on the Crim Sisters.
Mhm.
I put a post on the Comic Collab subreddit,
Sure.
and I was like, hey, these are my credentials. I'm looking for an artist. It's paid.
Mhm.
I that was a big key for it. Is like, I hate to say it because it sucks. Chantilly Mace was done without any money, and that's why I never got issue number 2 done. Michelle
Sure.
was kind enough to help me with the book. We did a Kickstarter. It was successful. It funded the printing of the book, but neither of us made any money on it.
Mhm.
It cost money. And so with Wayne, I sent him 3. I put together lookbooks. I'm used to it in film, right? So
Mhm. Mhm.
when I'm doing a project, I just put together a lookbook, like as part of the project. Like, okay, cool. Here's the idea. Here's some of the characters. Here's like some of the concept art. And me, I tend to also, one thing I would recommend a lot of people when you're writing a thing, if you have an idea, if it's derivative from anything, and I mean that in a positive way, I don't mean derivative as a negative way.
Sure.
Start grabbing images and make yourself a folder. I know some people do Pinterest boards. I'm a curmudgeon. I just have a folder on my hard drive that I just save everything to. and for every project, each different project gets its own. So the Crim Sisters has its own thing, Poop Riders has its own things that are like inspirational to it. The Crim Sister one's full of retrofuturism and Rocky Horror and Tank Girl stuff, and Crybaby, or like weird machines that I find, like or oh yeah, I have this character idea, cool, if I see a hairstyle even, I'll say that. So but then I put together a lookbook, and so I actually wasn't locked into the Crim Sisters is the book we were going to work on. I just sent Wayne 3 of my lookbooks. I was like, I'm thinking about doing one of these 3 projects. I think you'd be good for these 3. One of these 3. What do you think? And he's like, at that point, I like Stars and Garters. So I was like, he's like, because I don't want to write this. I don't want to do teenager stuff, because the other ones are like more not teenager friendly. One of them's the Teenage Ninja Turtles-y one, the derivative of that one, and then
Yes.
and then the other one is that one I'm not ready to announce yet, but that one's actually my wife cried when she read the script. She loved it. It's my favorite script I've written so far, and she loved it. But he's like, I don't like that one. He's like, I want to do this one, and I was like, cool. And so for me, I was like, well, then that's the one I'm running with, because I don't want the artist, like, I didn't want to like dictate to him. Yeah, I was hiring him to do a job.
Sure.
And a job makes it sound, but you know what I mean. I'm hiring him to do some.
Yeah,
some
but you
things
want him to be passionate about the project that he's working on.
I want him to be in, and he says that issue 2 is better than issue 1. So I already sent him issue 2. I'd finished that up and I sent it to him, and he's like, I like this one better. My wife is like, I like issue 2 better. I'm like, of course you do, because issue 1 is supposed to be not boring, but it's just like you're cutting up veggies, you're setting it up, like. The potatoes in there,
Sure. And speaking of setting it up, like when I first cracked this open, look, Bob and I both read this kind of, online. And of course it's not yet published in a regular like floppy format or anything. But hopefully
that's what we're hoping for.
Yes, that's the goal here. So hopefully we can hold it in our hands and read it soon, because geez, I can't even imagine. I mean, it was wonderful to read just on my phone, but but yes, of course, realizing the full world building and art and everything. I wanted to talk about the world building because, like, you have crafted this world. This world is that's one of the things. Look, in each episode of this podcast, Bob and I take a brand new comic book that had come out this week, and we kind of break it down. We talk about the story beats, the world building, the narrative, the dialogue, all of those things. We don't really give anything like a 1 through 10 rating. We're not that kind of podcast, but we're more like, hey, do we think that our listeners should move on to issue number 2? That's what we do here. So for the most part, most of the time, we strongly suggest that people move on to issue number 2. Every now and again, we're like, leave it in the dust, whatever. But world building is like super important to us, especially for a first issue. And I mean, the amount of world building that you're doing here in this issue,
I'm building a universe.
Yes, exactly. It's completely beyond a world. You have
I call it the universe, actually. So the little mu symbols, the universe. But yeah.
There's just so much going on here. I'd love to hear like your creative process on that. Even something as the names, they all fit well together here. Everything gels. It's very impressive what you've done with this universe. So
thank you on that. Like that, dude. That actually is like, it's not an insignificant amount of work. Like,
I can imagine.
Like it's one where it's like doing that. Like I have notes even with, so they don't have the same days of the week or the same months even on that planet. And so I renamed all the planets, or all the dates and months and everything like that. So there's like all sorts of like things. And mind you, Suburbarium, which is the first planet you're on, we don't see it again for a while. Like she leaves, Ariadne and Shirley leave the planet, and we're going somewhere completely different. The next issue, actually, I'll say we meet a character named Armory, and the refusal field, which the refusal field is basically where all the junk of the universe goes. Like a refuse field, a refusal. And so it's the refusal field, but you meet a character named Armory, who is this nun who lives on a metal moon. A robot nun living on a metal moon. And so, awesome. And then, the Golden Brother, we see their planet shows up, which it's named Gilterium, Gilt, Gilterium. And then, so my naming convention for all the planets is the Arium. So we're going to see a water planet, which it's going to be called Aquarium. Um,
Nice.
but for me, like that's the joy I find in like a story like this. It's like, why stick to what you're accustomed to? Like, Rocky Horror was a huge inspiration on this. Like, I'm a massive Rocky Horror fan. I think it's one of those like great pieces of like combination of music and making fun again of that 1950s like awkwardness. But the key to Frankenfurter is he's sexy dangerous, right? He's not just like, oh, it's a beautiful woman being beautiful and film noir. It's like, no, it's a dude, but like, okay,
Yeah.
but in that one, it's the planet of was it Transylvania in the galaxy of it's of course now I forget all of it. But like even in that, and it's always just like a throw off line. It's not like they focus on, we never see those planets, but they're there. And so for me, like all of that is important. Like, we're gonna see a character show up called the Quote, who's the queen of all time. She's mentioned. That's what Quote, because you have the greatest of all time. Mine's the queen of all time, so it's the Quote. And she becomes very, very important to the story longer on, and you realize like just how dangerous she is. She's this super powerful uber being. Like one of the scenes I want is going to be her like on a planet walking with a cape, and her cape is literally stretching around the planet. It's big.
That's amazing.
And I like the idea of like, we're in comic books as a medium. The thing I love the most is it doesn't cost me any more to have that image or the image of a planet of cul-de-sacs like Suburbarium as it costs for the same exact scenes of Shirley talking with meddling Mary in her kitchen. They're the same amount of money. So why would we want her talking in her kitchen when we can like let's go crazy, let's show the universe, let's show these like wild planets with weird fungi and metal planets and space fields and all that. So for me, like I'm like, if we have it, why not do it? Godzilla costs us the same amount of money as like Joe Schmo talking. Like I'm reading the current run of She-Hulk because I'm a massive She-Hulk fan.
Oh yeah, the current run of She-Hulk's great. Absolutely.
It's a little too much talking.
Yeah,
I'm like,
it's dialogue heavy. Yeah, absolutely.
It is. It's good, and it's actually reminds me of the old romance comics. Which, if you're into those, this is the way to find it. Right there, you go with your old She-Hulk. But like, if you look at the old John Byrne run during Sensational, I point upstairs because that's where my collection is. My comics are up there.
Up here.
So it's over there. They've got a baloney universe, right? Like, as a Sensational, I think it's 13. It's Howard the Duck in the baloney verse. John Byrne wasn't on that book, but or wasn't on it at that point. But my point is like, go wild. Like, give us the crazy universe. Like, give us like all the weird stuff you could possibly want to see, and but make it cohesive. That's the other thing too, is it's got to interlock with each other. Like, I know it's all silly because it is, like naming a planet Suburbarium is a silly name, and it's gonna get sillier. Like, but I also want to temper that with it being like an emotional story. Shirley's not just prototypical 1950s housewife. You find out a lot more about her history in specifically the second issue. We find out a lot more about her. Ariadne, you find out a lot more about her like the beginning of issue 2 is going to be essentially her history. And that planet that she's from, which is Illyrium, is this Greek style planet. And so but it's like, oh, okay, cool, so let's take it up a notch. Like, why do it? Like, why do a little Coliseum when we can do it even bigger? Like, everything must be bigger and better and bolder. And I'm that's what I want to see in comic books. Like I'm fine with the personal human story. Flutter was that. Flutter was a story of it's a kid who's got horizontal nystagmus and glaucoma, and he's dealing with his mother's I mean, they're living in abject poverty. But that one was full of like animated sequences that we wrote in there because we were like, what's the kid see? Yeah, we see that he's got a 200 something pound pig, but what is the kid actually seeing when he's imagining these things? And so for me, it's about going,
Well, I really like that. I really like that you point that out, because I think that a lot of times, you have your kind of two different camps in what comics should be, and there's no answer. I mean, comics
Yeah.
should just be whatever the creator wants them to be, whatever the reader's reading, whatever people are buying,
Yeah.
whatever. But a lot of times we circle back from these high concept ideas with all this world building, and then you have that loud portion of the public or the comic book reading public or whatever who wants things grounded, and they want it more gritty, and they want it set in their backyard. And I'm just look, I'm personally, I love Luke Cage, I love Daredevil, I love things like that. Of course, I love Spider-Man, but I love these huge high concept things. I mean, Saga is one of my favorite books of all time. It's so well written, and it's great how they just explore that universe. Of course, I think that I can't speak for you, Tony, but I'm pretty sure everyone is at least somewhat of a fan of the original Star Wars trilogy.
I wore lightsabers to my wedding.
There you go. See, exactly.
Yeah.
It's that world building. It's that
Yeah.
high concept world building that really kind of draws you in. And again, like the street level, this takes place in my own neighborhood, in my own backyard. There's definitely a place for that, and I
100%.
love that. But it's that high concept storytelling that really sells me, that really gets me deeply involved in a comic book where I just want to read an entire trade versus a single issue.
Well, I think you're 100%. So that's a couple things. That's one of the reasons why we decided. So the book I gave you guys was originally actually supposed to be split into 2 issues. So I originally wrote that as 2 issues.
Yeah.
And then I was working on it with Wayne, and I was like, so I got frustrated Chantilly Mace. So Chantilly Mace was 1 issue, and then we never got issue 2, 3, and 4, which was the arc. And so for this one, I was like, looking at it, I was like, she gets off of Suburbarium by the end of I mean, the name of the book is Escape from Suburbarium.
Sure.
She escapes.
Spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert for everybody. She escapes by the end of issue 1. She where was I going with this? I got lost. But yeah, she shit, I did get lost. All right, where were we? Back me up just a second.
We were just talking
Escaping Suburbarium.
Yeah, we were just talking about that world building, that how the stories, that the high concept stories.
So but I was gonna actually say before I tangented there was I was actually I love street level stories, but one of the big things that I think is really interesting about comic books, unlike let's say even live action film, I love. I mean, I went to school for it. It's what I do, or what I did for quite a while there. I love live action film. But at the end of the day, a dude is a dude is a dude. When you don't go into animation, you shoot a dude and he can look dark and gritty. He can look bright and shiny. But at the end of the day, it's a dude. The beauty behind comics is, like, I just started reading Sweet Paprika last night.
Oh, yeah.
I just reread all of Hellboy. I just read Eric Campbell's Goon.
Okay.
Which, if you haven't read his Hillbilly book is spectacular.
No, I've read Sweet Paprika. I have not read Goon or
actually, I have to say I'm a much bigger fan of Hillbilly than I am of Goon.
Okay.
Goon is good, but I think Hillbilly's a more interesting story. But the thing is, for me, at the end of the day, like, we have all these different styles inherent in the medium. You have your let's say Dave Gibbons, which looks great for Watchmen, right? But you don't want Frank Cho doing that book, right? And that's okay. And that's what makes it so good. If you draw in a Sikowitz style where it's like crazy and wild and gritty and dark, then, and you want to go realistic and dark, like, that's great. That's perfect for that book. But there's an inherentness to the artwork that allows you to go weirder, allows you to go bigger if you want. And none of those are wrong. If you're into, like, all I want is, it has to be like the Transformers movies versus the 80s Transformers cartoon. It's like, why not both? Like, both can, like, coexist, and you can go, you can have Unicron, man, like, voiced by Orson Welles, and that is okay in that one, but it's not going to work in the live action because you've gotten, realistic and gritty and Shia LaBeouf. And I love me some old Shia LaBeouf back in the day, but man, I even liked him in the Charlie's Angels movie. I will defend both those terrible McG movies. But I have a whole list of those movies I'm willing to defend. But I think with comics, that's something that's, like, not overlooked, but, like, you had, like, the 90s where everybody was mimicking that Image style, and that was kind of a little rough because it did, I feel like, force the comics to not necessarily ground, because those guys went crazy, but gritty everything, right?
Yep.
And in the 80s, it was, that like really shiny and perfect like look up until, Frank Miller and all that. But I think the comics themselves like lend themselves to allowing you to explore all those things. And whatever you're into, that book is probably out there for you. A little more, I think, with, like manga, they're really great about it. The Japanese with what they do with manga is so much better than what we do over here. I actually think we need to see like more of those like mundane stories. I'm not going to buy them. I want the weird stuff. But I think that like that's an untapped audience. Is like books like even like She-Hulk, which, like the last few issues have been really good because I get a little more action in them, a little more pathos. But I really think those first, I think 6 or so issues where it's dealing more with like her interactions with Jack of Hearts could be really, or like, and could be an interesting book. Like, where is the romantic life of superheroes? Like, that's got to be tough dating in your greens, dating in tights. It's got to be
Yeah, that's something they even were able to kind of convey in the Disney Plus She-Hulk show. Of course, it didn't revolve around that, but that was like a big plot point, sort of what's going on in her dating life. And it's something very interesting. It's something that I think, at least to an extent, all of us kind of wonder reading those comic books. This is a person who's out there, doing those things. She's not relegated to just superheroing out all the time and hulking out, and that's all she does. She's more than that. She's of course an attorney and everything she has going on in her personal life. And it's interesting that you say that, because it's that kind of mindset that gets you to create your own universe or your own world or your own characters, where you say, well, I might not be a writer on She-Hulk, but what would my character do in this situation? What would my character's dating life be like in this? I think, throughout reading your book here, and you talked a little bit at the beginning about Tank Girl. I love kind of the influence that I did notice with Tank Girl there, and I wasn't able to pinpoint that until you said it. But after you said it, of course, I see it, and it's wonderful, and it's more kind of an homage to that kind of look and storytelling. So I don't think I need to ask you what your inspiration for this book was, because I think you kind of laid it out. You had a lot of different inspiration for it.
There are stacks. Like, the thing is like, what is it they say? A bad artist borrow, a good artist steal. I'm not saying I'm a good artist, but like you just take those ideas that like you think will work within your world. Like it's something okay. So I know it's not the popular opinion, but I watched Puss in Boots. I didn't like it. And I didn't like it. The new one. Yeah. Okay. Puss in Boots, The Last Wish, I think it is. It wasn't bad. It was done well, but it was animating, like the action scenes were animated on twos, just like they did on Spider-Verse. And like a lot of the action felt very Spider-Verse-y. And I don't mind borrowing and stealing, make it your own. That is totally cool. It's what I do. I'm not going to deny anyone else doing it, but I tend to go a little farther back. You know what I mean? Like, use it as an influence. Don't just copy it. And, animating on twos, let's be honest, nobody was doing that before Spider-Verse. Having the like, and so it just looked, when I watched it, my wife and I both watched it, and we're like, I mean, it's not bad. It's fine. If I were a kid, it'd be great. I'm not the target audience. But watching it, it just didn't give me anything new. Whereas Spider-Verse, nobody had done the things they were doing on there. We saw a brand new piece of cinema. It was amazing. And mind you, it's full of stolen things, right? It stole from comic books. I mean, it just was like Kirby book and like cutting panels out. It's like, screw it. We're just going to put them right on there. And it worked beautifully. And it's not even because it's like, oh, it's old and it was better. It's like, no, you just like, you took it, you remixed it, you made it your own. And that's, like for me, I was going to say, actually another thing I wanted to tangent back to Street Level Heroes. So I'm not like, but the one book, if I got a chance to write for Marvel, the one book I would want to write Darkhawk, but in the 90s.
Oh, yes.
Not current please. Darkhawk, where he's like a cool cosmic hero.
No.
I love the idea of a power that you don't have to be born into, bitten into, like irradiated into. It's just a gem. You got the gem, cool. You could turn into Darkhawk. I'm like, perfect, cool. Because I love the idea that, and I love, if you look at early Darkhawk, he couldn't even fly. Early Darkhawk had to grapple with his little bad Wolverine knockoff claw.
Yep.
He had to grapple to the top of buildings and then glide places. So he's
Mhm.
not even flying. He's got wings. He's named after a hawk, and the dude can't fly.
Yep.
Mwah, beautiful. And he's got kind of super strength. Like, sure, he can throw a car, but like in the MCU, everyone can throw a car, you know?
Mhm.
And he can shoot a chest blast, but let's be honest, you go toe to toe with Iron Man, Iron Man's going to out chest blast you, right?
Absolutely. You don't stand a chance against Iron Man.
You don't stand a chance, but you give that to a guy who robbed and killed Darkhawk in his bed,
Mhm.
and he needs to go commit some crimes. Suddenly, that dude's a powerhouse. If you
Yep.
don't have, you know, a superhero there to stop him, someone who's got stronger powers. And I thought that was a really like interesting idea. So for me, I want to write like that's the one character, like street level. Make it gritty, make it dark, make it like a forgotten item on a shelf. Like I love the idea of Darkhawk doing these like silly Darkhawk things. And he's just so 90s, that block helmet
Oh
he's
yeah,
got.
he's
good.
the epitome. I have to ask you then, since you bring
Yeah.
up Darkhawk and you bring up what you would do for Marvel if you were at Marvel, have you ever watched? And I don't know the name of the series, so I'm going to sound like an idiot now. It might be the 616. It's like basically like a little special feature show that's on Disney Plus. Paul Scheer from the How Did This Get Made podcast, and I don't know, he's on a bunch of other things, maybe a TV show called The League or something like that. But Paul Scheer kind of took this deep dive where he went to, of course it was very scripted, but he went to the vaults of Marvel and started, all right, I'm going to pull out the most obscure characters I could find and write this little animation, and I'm going to get a budget and do it. And he pulled out Brute Force, that 90s team with the dolphin and the lion and everything, and kind of did like this. Of course, it was a comedy, so the budget didn't dictate very well. You know, they were only able to do like 30 seconds of animation or whatever, but they ended up doing it, and they put this thing out, and it was so interesting. So I didn't know if you had seen that.
No, I haven't seen it yet.
Yeah.
But,
oh God,
but
you
I
gotta
like,
watch it. So cool.
but James Gunn is like the biggest champion of that,
Yep.
you know? So I did want to say, like, I went to film school because of trauma films, actually.
Okay.
Like Lloyd Kaufman, I was actually fortunate enough. I worked on the live action parts of a video game called Loco Cycle.
Wow.
And the on set was Lloyd Kaufman, James Gunn, and Tom Savini.
That's awesome. Wow.
Dude, highlights. Like
Yeah.
I got James Gunn actually assigned my copy of The Specials, which if you haven't seen that movie, okay, nobody's seen this damn movie.
No,
it's so good. But
I haven't even seen Romeo and Juliet, so I haven't seen The Specials.
Okay, so The Specials wasn't a trauma film, but he had written it and he's in it. He started it, but it's got Thomas Hayden Church. It's about the 6th or 7th greatest superhero team on the planet.
Okay.
And so they never use their powers. It's a brilliant film. I mean, truly is like early James Gunn, like loving superheroes movie. It's completely overlooked. Everyone brings up Mystery Men, which I also think is a masterpiece. Like my wife and I quote that movie more than any other thing in our day-to-day lives. Like that movie was super. But The Specials it's great. And James Gunn, you know, he gave us like, you know, he brought back Polka Dot Man, right? You know, like who's gonna write Polka Dot Man and make him such a tragic character? But yeah, so but yeah, I met Lloyd. I was gonna say I met Lloyd, and I'm not afraid to talk to anyone. I'll walk up to anyone. I'll talk to you. I walk up to him, head down. Mr. Kaufman, I just wanted to tell you, like, I got into movies because of you. And he's like, oh, I'm sorry for ruining your life. I'm like, yeah, no, and so I love, but I love seeing like guys like James Gunn, like guys like that, you know, bring up those old characters. They might not be the best, right? But there was a certain like silliness that can be like attacked again, and like tell us more of those stories. Give us more Kite Man. You know, give us more of that. The cool, super fun hero, like they can exist, but it's not bad to look at like what's been done before, the camp, the oddities. I mean, Mr. Freeze, right? You've got what's his face did why am I blanking? Bruce Timm and I'm blanking on his name. The guy who wrote for Batman the Animated Series, co-creator of Paul Dini, right? Co-creator of Harley Quinn. Yeah. What Paul Dini, up until the animated series, Mr. Freeze was a joke.
Yep.
We laughed at Mr. Freeze, though Arnold, of course,
Oh yes.
let's get out of here. What is it? What happened to the dinosaurs? The Ice Age. It's completely stupid.
We're circling back around now, though, to knowing that was the greatest comic book performance of all time.
So I
it.
defend those two movies as well.
You and me
Again,
both.
what I think is I always say that it's the audience's fault for watching it wrong. Now, mind you, it was the
Yes.
studio's fault for selling it to us wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But those weren't sequels to Tim Burton's movies; they were sequels to the Adam West Batman. And as long as you watch them as that, they're grand old time, But if you watch them as sequels to the Burton, I'm sorry, what was that?
It's a good way of thinking about it.
Yeah, it's all you. Watch the movie better. Like you're watching it wrong. So I'm glad we're seeing a bit of a renaissance in that, like, people are going back to the camp. Someone like James Gunn being co-CEO of DC is something we would have never seen 10, 15 years ago, especially during the Zack Snyder era.
Yeah, no.
Of superheroes, and he's, like, to me, a reflection of the 90s. Okay, so admittedly, I've never seen The Watchmen. I won't be watching The Watchmen. Anytime an artist is willing to give up the money, like Alan Moore did for that, I don't. If he had taken the money, I'd have watched it. I'd have been like, you took the money, but he didn't take the money, and so I'm like, all right, I'm not going to watch this movie. But I honestly, Zack Snyder, like, from everything I've heard, I heard it's a good enough movie, but I also hear it missed the mark, on the tone and what the original was trying to say.
Well, I can agree with that.
And so he is, to me, Zack Snyder's, like, DCU was a reflection of, let's say, the 90s in comics, where it was about the bigger muscles and being cooler and being badass and strong. And James Gunn is going at it going like, yeah, we can have that, and that's all cool. But, like, why can't we have Polka Dot Man show up with a bunch of lumps on his face? Wouldn't that be a little bit funny? Or, like, we have King Shark and he's, King Shark hand, like, why can't we have those things? And, like, both can coexist in comics. And that's what's so good. Like, comics as a medium are, like, to me, like, them and animation are the two greatest pieces of medium we have, because you can go serious and you go sad, and you can do it in the same 24 pages, the same 48 pages in my case.
You can create without the restrictions.
Yeah.
You're restricted to what your mind can create, and that's it.
The only movie I can compare to it is the Wachowskis' Speed Racer film.
Okay.
Which is a completely underrated, unwatched film. I didn't watch it until by accident. I had one of those passes at, like, Blockbuster to date me for it, where I could rent as many movies as I want.
You feel any better? So.
Yeah, I owed so many late fees in the 90s. But I rented that movie because I was like, I need to rent 3 movies today, like, because I was like, I got 9 hours off. I'm watching 3 movies, so. Yep. I rented that movie and I watched it and I was like, this is amazing. Like, I've got a monkey throwing poo, and then somehow I'm like, my heart is breaking for his love of his missing brother and what that loss has done to this character. It's in the same movie, but you don't see that. Like, you have to, like, you see as Zack Snyder's Man of Steel, and we never get a silly moment ever. It pummels you the whole film.
Yep.
And so for me, like, with what I'm doing, even with Crim Sisters, or what I'm doing with even Warriors of the Septic Seas, it's okay for us to laugh at it and it'd be a little silly. But I'm also, telling a story of, like, Shirley, living in a world that she doesn't like, in a life that she doesn't like, and she has no way out until one appears, and then she just grabs on and goes.
Yeah, and then she runs with it. That's speaking of the Crim Sisters, I in concepts and like you were talking about, the James Gunn of it all, not that this is unique just to James Gunn, but as we talk about it, bringing in, lowering those inhibitions, just kind of bringing in what's there. We again, I talked a little bit before about, like, how everything doesn't have to be gritty. It doesn't have to be in your backyard. It can take place wherever. We're like you were saying, we're kind of only limited to our imagination. That's it. So in the Crim Sisters, whenever you first kind of, and this is a small spoiler. It's not really a spoiler.
No, dude, spoil all you want. It's totally cool.
Okay. It's just
issue 1.
It's not a spoiler.
I'm gonna try keeping spoilers on 2 as much as I can down, but 1, good. I'm like,
good. But I mean, it's right there. It's a reveal kind of in the second page or so. this giant foot ship. I want to talk about this giant foot ship for a second because, man,
the defeater.
that is a high concept.
It's called the defeater. DEFEETER.
Exactly.
Yes. Yeah. No, that's in the marketing for it. Like, all the stuff I'm doing for it. No. The defeater is an important ship. Yeah.
And you work really well with these. I don't want to say puns because that makes it sound like they're also like kind of throwaway, not serious things or whatever. But
well, I want to take them seriously. I like taking my puns very seriously.
That's what I was going to say about them. Yeah. They're puns in a way, but it's also a part of this story. It's not a throwaway gag that's there for one line. These worlds, this universe, everything. There's a lot of puns in it, but it works for the story. That's kind of the purpose of what you're doing here. Not the purpose, but
no, it is though. Yeah. No, I mean, no. I think you hit the nail on the head. Absolutely. I love puns. I love portmanteaus and I love puns. I feed off of them. Chantilly Mace. Yep. I mean, my wife was mad because I also hadn't ever heard the song before.
Oh wow. Okay.
Chantilly Lace. I'd never heard it, but I knew the phrase, so I was like, oh, Chantilly Mace. Oh, she's got a mace. And then her first opponent was Susie Homemaker, and she has a frying pan for a weapon. But like for me, like I take my puns seriously, and I know that sounds terrible for it, but like why not run with it like that? Like Polka Dot Man. I keep bringing him up, but like the defeater is a dangerous ship, and my concept for it is essentially it's an old god's leg. So it's one of your elder gods, your Galactuses, your whatever. It's basically they discovered this giant leg, and then they built a ship onto it because it never rotted and never decomposed. And so they built this ship onto this giant foot, and you actually find out, and see, here's me spoiling for the later one, but you find out that actually they had to get permission to use that from the quote. So they weren't supposed to actually, like, normally it's like essentially like an illegal weapon. It's mustard gas, the equivalent of using mustard. They're not allowed to use that weapon in war, but because she was, the quote wanted to deal with the Krim sisters, she allowed the use of the defeater. And so, but I like the idea. It's like, is it silly? It's like, yeah, it's kind of silly, but it's also this giant foot that, kicks space giant, warships in half. Like that was a big concept for it. Like where I came up with it. I was like, oh, wouldn't it be funny if like you had like this giant god kicking, ships in half, like giant spaceships in half. And then I was like, oh, but what if it's
kind of cool? You take something that's a little silly, maybe a little campy.
It's a lot silly.
And then you take it, but then you take it seriously. You just kind of run with it. That's, in my opinion, that's how you do it. If it's not there for a throwaway joke, then you really double down on it and you run with it. And that's what you've done here. Sorry, Bob. And I really like that approach to it. I want to talk for a second about your plans with this book. So we know that you've written this. We know that you've gotten it illustrated. It's in the process of finishing its coloring and its final form now, I suppose. What are your plans with it once it's published? Because I want to kind of get into, look, our
this is the scary part, right?
I definitely, look, this is definitely a call to action. Anybody, any of our listeners, jump on Kickstarter, back this project, because this is freaking amazing. Like, you're gonna love this.
It should show up at the end of February, so we should go live at the end of February with our Kickstarter. I've got everything like 95% written. The Kickstarter, getting all the art assets in there, linking my account, making sure everything's like set up for it. But it's
crossing all your T's and dotting your I's.
Exactly.
So what we want to know here is, so this gets published, it gets funded, you get it published, you get it out there. Are you self-publishing this? Is this?
I am. We submitted it. The only thing I ever heard back, it wasn't a no, but apparently I low-resed one of the releases to Dark Horse, and they're like, yeah, it was 2 months later after I had sent it to them, and they're like, they sent me back was like, we had to throw it out because this release was too low resolution for us to read, but you can resubmit it. So I resubmitted it. And I haven't heard anything, but I didn't hear anything back from all of them, and that's fine. I'm not, I don't get mad about it. So, I mean, really, if I can keep this one, like keep releasing the books, basically use this one to fund the next one to fund, I want to keep releasing this book. I'm hoping
Okay.
to expand into other books that I've written, hiring more artists and like
Mhm.
getting more books done.
But you want to get like an ongoing series out there.
Not completely. So this book
Okay.
is actually, the 48 pages, it's 12 of those.
Yep.
So
Okay.
this is actually a very finite, I don't write an ongoing series. Like in
Sure.
general, I don't gravitate toward it. I like endings. So
I mean,
like
well, yeah, understood. Look, 12 48 pagers is, I mean,
20,
definitely not an
yeah,
ongoing, but it's, yeah,
it's a
that's,
ways.
yeah,
It's a journey.
yeah. I mean, I could only dream to read something like that where I don't get pissed off that after 22 pages with ads, I've
You
got
know,
to wait till next month for the next issue to come out.
and
So
that's the
sure.
thing. Like ideally, hopefully, I was hoping like every 4 months,
Mhm.
do another Kickstarter for the next issue.
Great.
I feel that gives us enough time to like get everything done. Get everybody's book shipped so they can do it, they can enjoy it,
Mhm.
absorb it, and then like 3 or 4 months down the line, we get you a new book. Like
Yes.
and be ready for it. And that's the thing too, is I don't want to fall behind, and I feel like giving us that amount of time gives us enough time to again cross our I's, dot our I's, cross our T's. And
Mhm.
I think 4 months is theoretically enough time for that with how small of our operation is. But that's what ideally I want to do, is I want to start doing that and then expand into my other projects. I mean, and it mostly in comics, primarily, we're doing some animation. Me and Francisco, that's the director and artist on Warriors of Septic Seas, and he was
Mhm.
actually kind enough. He did the cover, the main A cover for the Crim Sisters is done by him.
Yes. Okay. I saw his
Um,
name credited on that. Yep.
yeah, he did the A cover. But and with him, I'm working on more animation stuff. But for what I'm doing with this, I want to do more like. But this book is right now my primary focus.
Mhm.
When it comes to comic books, I have. If I can get this series done, 12 issues would be spectacular.
Yeah.
And it gets wilder. Like we start seeing, like I honestly think issue 1 is as tame as I'm gonna be. I'm gonna go even farther out there. I've got crazy planets, and a big thing with Crim Sisters is it's a lot of the things that like I grew up loving. You've got like you're gonna have a planet that's inspired by Frazetta work. You've got your goth planet.
Mhm.
Like your vampire planet. It's gonna
And
be
like you said, why the hell not? I mean, you're not limited to anything other.
yeah.
You can put anything out there that you love or that you like or that you hate or anything.
And then that's a big thing too, is like because I'm not beholden to anyone. Like if I don't like a character or a character needs to go,
Yep.
they're gone. We can follow different things. And I that's one of the struggles I have with like not mainstream books, but books that aren't finite,
Mhm.
is like this book has an ending.
Yep.
Like it will end a certain way. My wife and I are in disagreement. She doesn't like the ending I have for it, so who knows how it will end, but it will, at the end of issue 12. And that's not to say that you can't go back and like touch on it again. Like, oh,
Mhm.
maybe we'll do I mean, that's way far down the line, but the universe is there. The universe is there for me to
Yep.
pull from if I need to. Um, but yeah, ideally I would do that. I mean, getting picked up by a publisher, I'm so the thing is I'm not overly worried about making money off
Mhm.
this book.
Sure.
Like, oh, I've got to make I've got to. What I want is this book to pay for this book.
Yeah.
And
You're not using this to keep the lights on.
no, I'm
This.
not using. I'm
Yeah.
and so for me, what I want is people to read the book, enjoy the book,
Mhm.
see the next book. Like that's what I'm really trying to get to that end line of issue 12, and people get to read that, because I do think it's a fun little journey. I think it's a little, we'll see how far I can stretch the puns, as my serious puns, as we can go. Because the issue 3 has got some things that might be a little bit questionable.
Mhm.
Because we do see on issue 3, we'll see Giltarium, and well, that's what it's called right now. Who knows? It might change name by the time but we'll see there's one joke in there that she's not my wife. Again, my wife is my yardstick for like, did I go far enough and too far?
Yep.
And depending on the groan I get, like determines whether I'm in the right like range.
Sure.
It's like I'm gonna make a spaceship, but it's gonna be on a foot. I'm like,
You're like, hey, that wasn't a bad one.
that was good. That was good. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Well, look, it's been amazing talking about this book.
yeah.
I'm so thrilled to get to check out issue 2. I cannot wait till till this first book gets published, and then I get issue number 2. What I want to, in closing with the book, what I want to ask about is, look, it's dead set. Our listeners are donating to your Kickstarter. You don't have to worry about that. Everybody out there in the all new, all different nation is absolutely donating to this Kickstarter. So,
Thank you.
so again, don't worry about that. But what can our listeners expect whenever they donate to your Kickstarter? I know that Kickstarter's got a lot of different levels of things that you can or can't do, whatever. So,
okay, so I've got a few things. Smaller tiers, we're gonna have. I'm gonna have a trading card. But on the back side is going to be a Crim Sisters auxiliary membership card. So, and the card is going to be the front cover of issue 1, the art by Francisco, without the title, but it's going to be like a blank. I'm a big trading card guy. I've got a massive trading cards from the 90s. I've got 2 full collections of the Marvel masterpieces.
Oh yes.
Like all those ones that were going to send us to college. Remember?
Yep.
You're supposed to go to college from those.
They're picking up again. Don't worry.
yeah, sure. But we're gonna have that, and then the big stretch goal we're gonna have is gonna be we're gonna do the book is gonna be released, probably the physical copy. So the digital copy is gonna be released in color. That's gonna be no problem. The physical copy we're gonna release in front, color covers, but the interior is gonna be black and white. But if we hit our stretch goal, which isn't going to be much more than the main one, we're just going to print it in color, and not increase the price or anything on the people's levels. Just we'll eat it. Like I said, really the big thing I'm trying to do is cover the cost of getting the book done.
And can I throw this out there to all the listeners listening? You definitely you're going to love this book either way, whether you read it in black and white or color. You want to see this thing in color, so help Tony with his stretch goal. Throw as much cash as you can at this thing. Seriously, you want to see this thing in color. But sorry, I just had to.
No, and the digitals are going to be in color. So no matter what, the digitals are going to be in color. So you will get to kind of see it. But wouldn't it be better if you're holding a physical copy and it's in color? And and I'll have it on the thing also if you want it signed by me. Wayne's actually out of he's in. Okay, I'm gonna be back Great Britain somewhere.
Oh wow, okay.
I'm terrible about it.
I got you.
Yeah, so it's a bit away, but I'm gonna but if you want it signed, I'll have it on there. And the membership cards are gonna be signed and numbered, no matter what. I'm signing and number all of those.
That's awesome.
Because I think it's just originally I was gonna do it as a different because I'm a sucker for the Merry Marvel Marching Society stuff. And so I was like, I love a membership card. And I'm looking at the thing and I was like, man, this is a cool piece of art. I would love it on a trading card. But I don't know what to do on the back. And I'm I was originally going you could have his stats for the character and blah, blah, blah. But I was like, I'll just do it as a membership card. And then each time what I'm hoping is for issue 2, we're going to have a different membership card with issue 2's cover and, have it as an ongoing thing because I can put those together myself. So, but I'm, that's going to be our kind of our levels is membership card, you get digital copies and then there's the membership card if you want something physical and then physical copies of the book. And we're going to have an A cover and a B cover. I think I included both covers in the copy I sent you guys. One was the Wayne Loudon one. And then
we saw the regular and the variant.
And so we'll have those. Yeah.
Look, please,
sorry.
Please. No.
So we're going to have a slightly higher tier one. I'm not sure how much I'm going to ask for it yet, but hopefully the highest one. Wayne, one of the things that's interesting about Wayne's work is he's old school. So he does it pen and paper. His original drawings are all, so he actually has his original 11 by 17s.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah. So we're hoping to put those on the Kickstarter as some of the higher tier. And then one below that, I don't know if anyone cares, but I have 4 copies of the script with all my notes that I'm going to also have on as one of the tiers. Cause I was like, if you want to see how I screw up a book, here you go.
Look, I can tell you guys in the short time talking to Tony here that we've just met Tony and we've been talking to him just for a little bit now. That's the most Tony thing that I could imagine anybody getting is that script with the handwritten notes and everything. And Jesus, I mean, I might be donating that. So we'll have to see whenever the Kickstarter starts up for that one. Tony, it has been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. I really, really appreciate you coming out. I want you one more time to just go ahead and tell everybody where they can find you, where they can find your work, where they're going to be able to find this Kickstarter, under what. Throw it all out there, please, and plug whatever you have.
So the big one, right now we're doing it under at Ponderous, I believe, is mine. But look up Tony Franklin, not the football player or the bass player. But if you look up the Crim Sisters, stuff's coming up for there. The stuff I'm working with Francisco on Warriors of the Septic Seas, you can find our stuff for that at Studio Round Rock is actually where that one's at. But yeah, hopefully, like I said, we'll have it at the end of February, closer to the end of February. I figure got to skip Valentine's Day because nobody wants to spend money on, like, darling, I spent money for this Crim Sisters comic for you. I don't see it as like, well, I guess if you have the right kind of lady, it's the right kind, or the right kind of significant other, it is the right book. But yes, but thank you very much for having me. I always, I tend to tangent, but I love talking comics, and I like, I usually live in my little windowless basement and work on my silly little comic books. So I'm hoping to, send more out and hope you guys enjoy it. Thanks for having me.
No, thank you so much for coming on. Like I said, it's been an absolute pleasure, tangents and all. We really appreciate you coming on. And again, one last time to our listeners, everybody out there, as you listen to this episode, go check out Tony's work and make sure you hop on Kickstarter to fund that Crim Sisters #1. It is amazing.
Thank you.
You can trust me and Bob. You trust us up to this point. Trust us on this one. Tony, thank you so much. Again, been an absolute pleasure. You're invited back anytime you want to come.
Don't say something like that, man. I'll talk anytime. I love talking.
We'll have you on a regular episode to review a book with us. Be careful.